Welcome in, everybody. I'm just getting set up here. Give me just a moment. Oh my God. Okay. I'm getting everything set up over here, but tell me where you're all coming from. Where are you tuning in from in this live stream? What part of the world? Do a little roll call. It's the weirdest thing ever. Sorry, I'm just dealing with a little camera issue here. All right. All right. I look different. Everyone keeps saying that this week. I'm like, do I? I don't know. I guess. Okay, where are you all coming from? Let's see here. Severn, Maryland. Czech Republic. Miami, El Paso, Utah, Evanston, Seattle, Winnipeg. That's cool. California. Let's see. Indiana and Iowa. Alberta. From Michigan. Yeah, you can see Hilda. She's crashed out over there. Oh, let's see. Get myself back in the middle. Pasadena. You know what I found on the camera was that it was like mirroring it or something. So it was like flipping I have a new web camera, and it's like its orientation is like flipped from where it usually is. So it was like it's making my face look kind of backward or something. It was weird. Okay, anyway. Yay, 80,000 subscribers. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here today and celebrate with all of you. Let's see here. New Zealand. That's amazing. No headphones. Yeah, I'm also in the process of trying to replace them because I have these headphones that I use, but they hurt my head. Like the bar of the top, it makes my head sore. So I got so sick of it that I was like, okay, I'll just deal. Like I really like being able to hear myself while I talk rather than speaking into a big empty room, because it kind of feels like I'm with an audience more when I have headphones in. But I'm so sick of it hurting my head. So I'm like, okay, I'm done for now. Just deal with it. It's the haircut. Okay, I guess so. The other thing that I mention to people, like I've told you guys this on the channel before, but every couple of months, my wife and I get something called a skin pen treatment. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that before. It's like called like micro needling. It's really weird. Like it like breaks open your skin, and then it produces new collagen in your face. So I just had one of those done, and my face always looks kind of glowy right after. I don't know. I don't know if it works so much or not, but I've been enjoying doing it. It makes me feel a little less self-conscious when I'm on camera every single day, just to be honest. I have no shame in sharing that kind of stuff. Sassy's yoga and astrology. It's been a minute since I've seen you. Got a haircut. I did get a haircut. Like, I don't know. That was like 2 weeks ago. Turkey. Oh, from Mankato. Hey. New York, Baton Rouge, Toronto, Nebraska, Pennsylvania, Switzerland, Michigan, Anishinaabe territory. Oh, that's super cool. Hi, Diana. Adam, drop the skincare routine. You're glowing. Well, I just did. If you heard me, I was just talking about what I do. Otherwise, I just, I don't know, I take care of my face like everyone else, I guess. Your aura is different than it has been. Well, I did just go to Las Vegas for 2 days for Ashley's birthday. That kind of felt rejuvenating, honestly, to go see live music at the Sphere. So maybe that kind of reset me a little bit. I don't know. How are you choosing readings? I'll tell you about that later. Stay tuned for that. Well, the other thing that's probably people are noticing, because I've gotten at least 100 comments on this in the past like week or so, is that I'm just at the very end. Ooh, Kentucky. That's cool. I was born in Kentucky, so I'm always a little excited when I see that. Vegas was amazing. Thanks for asking. Sorry, I got distracted. So I'm at the very end. The whole Mars retrograde, I've been in a cut phase in my bodybuilding coaching program. So that means that I've been getting my body fat percentage as low as possible. So I compared to October, November, I'm down like 12 pounds and at like 8% body fat right now. So I'm really thin. Like my face gets really thin when that happens. But then I'll go into like bulking over the summer into the fall, and you'll see me kind of get a little bit bigger again. That's a pretty standard pattern for me since I started bodybuilding. Kind of goes through a cycle like that. From Vernon, Canada, Eileen. Very cool. Let's see. Don't want a headphone dent on your head. That's exactly right. I just, Adam speaking into the void is a good thing. It's so creepy, like talking into a room with nobody when I'm recording every day. I can't explain it. It just trips me up. So I typically like the headphones, but Violetta says, that's a great treatment. Dermabrasion, not micro, gave me the absolute best results ever. Oh, that's cool. I'll have to look into that. They got lots of options at this place I go to. Very cool. Sibelius, I hope I said that right, says, I feel like we just celebrated 40K. Yeah, it's like a couple years ago, it was 50 or whatever. So it's pretty cool to see the growth. I'm really, really thankful for the growing audience on the channel. Let's see. Ottawa, West Yellowstone, Sao Paulo. Oh, I love that. Brazil in the house. Minneapolis, Los Angeles. Well, I won't prolong this any longer. I wanted to give at least a little time for people to show up here for our live stream today. So we'll go ahead and get into it. Can you please shout out my kids so they stop asking me to ask you for one? Monique, what are your kids' names again? I forget. Monique's a longtime student at Nightlight. And I know, well, Monique's kids, if you're listening, hello. Hope you guys are doing well today. Brody and Lindsay, that's right. Brody and Lindsay, wherever you are at, I hope that you're doing well. I hope your Girl Scout cookie fundraiser that I saw Monique promoting on Instagram was super successful. Yeah, you guys are looking cool as always. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get into it now that we've been here for a few minutes. I am going to do a few things today. The major content for the day that I would usually produce, Mars-Pluto opposition, we're going to do live. So I'm going to say a little bit about that opposition from an archetypal perspective, and then I'm going to walk you through all 12 whole sign house horoscopes. So we'll do some live horoscopes today. After that, I'm going to open it up for some astrological Q&A, and then maybe take 2 or 3 birth chart readings to demonstrate a little bit about Hellenistic theory and technique, and use that as a way of briefly promoting the upcoming year 1 course. So we'll do that at the end. Before we get into it, I want to remind you all that if you have not yet, please like and subscribe. It helps the channel to grow immensely. If you enjoy astrology, if it's a part of your spiritual path in life, then consider this a part of your daily spiritual practice. Subscribing to the channel really helps us grow. We see that a huge amount of people watch the channel regularly that are not yet subscribed. That really means a lot to us if you take that second to click the subscribe button. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. We're in promotion for our year 1 class right now. Toward the end, when I do live birth chart readings, I'm going to talk more about the course. So stick around for that portion of the live stream if you want to see some live birth chart readings. I'll tell you how you can submit your birth chart to join me live in the studio and have your chart read. You got to make sure you feel comfortable being on a camera, sharing yourself and your chart with the audience, obviously, but I'll tell you how to do that when we get to that portion. And then I'll say a little bit about why you may find the Nightlight programs a good fit, starting with the year 1 course in June. Before I go any further, there is a few things. One other thing I want to point you towards. Some of you know my wife, Ashley, who is an herbalist. Her apprenticeship program you can find at Skyhouse Herbs. It just started today. There are a variety of need-based pricing options that are available for all of our programs, including hers. If you go to skyhouseherbs.com, click on Herbal Foundations Apprenticeship. It's not too late to join her course, which if you're someone who is looking at herbs and gemstones and other things that can be remediation tools for your life with astrology, her course is fantastic. And so check that out. The other thing I want to promote is this book. This is called Divination, Oracles, and Omens. You'll see me promoting it on the channel next week. I don't get anything for promoting this. This is just something that I'm doing because I believe in it. There are a couple of scholars, Michelle Aroney and David Zeitlin, sent me this book. They are scholars who put together a nice little compendium of global divination traditions. You got ancient Jewish bibliomancy. You have things like African basket divination, Ifa and Yoruba culture. You have contemporary astrology, all sorts of global divinatory traditions kind of all kept in one neat little reference. And they sent it to me for free and just said, we thought you'd appreciate this. If you really like it, maybe you could promote it on your channel. And I really did like it. I love when scholars take divination seriously and give it the respect it deserves as a spiritual tradition, rather than casting it off as superstitious or fortune telling or whatever. And this is a book that does that by some respectable academics. I'm so happy to see something like this out there. So if you want a nice little desk reference on global divination traditions, check this book out. You can get it on Amazon. I'll be promoting it next week on the channel as well. So yeah, it's a beautiful little reference. I'm so happy to have, because I know I'll use it, and I like things like that. Lana says, Adam, I'm in the process of signing up. I'm only able to due to your financial assistance program. Signed up last night. Your team got back with a very gracious offer. Thank you. I can't wait. See, that's the thing. When you sign up with need-based tuition, you pick a rate that works for you. We confirm it, set you up with a payment plan within that sliding scale, so you can match it with your budget. That we know allows a lot more people who otherwise wouldn't be able to take our programs to do so. And then we just trust people who can afford our normal price will choose that. And it's worked for 14 years, going on 15 now. So it's a big part of our values as a business. Okay, well, on that note, let's talk about Mars, Pluto, and let's get into some horoscopes. Yeah, like one thing that I want to say, first of all, is that when we're dealing with a Mars-Pluto dynamic, the number one thing that I think we have to avoid is fear. So I'll just say a few things about that first, because I think it's important with a transit like this. Anytime you get Mars and Uranus, Mars and Pluto, those combinations in particular tend to provoke a lot of fear, and maybe unintentional or unconscious fear-mongering on the parts of astrologers who are probably doing their best to represent some of what can be very difficult about a transit, but may unconsciously actually provoke a lot of fear in the process. I try to be very aware of that as an astrologer, because it's something that we can easily fall into. When you've seen a lot of astrology, and I've done, 13, somewhere between 13 and 14,000 readings at this point. When you do that many readings and you see certain combinations over and over again, it's hard not to be sort of very realistic about the difficult ones. And yet, with Mars in particular, Mars is a planet that was associated for ancient astrologers with the reality of fear. Fear is something that I see, like, my kids have to encounter fear and work with it and work through it to grow strong, to grow confident, to develop the capacity to persevere and overcome challenges. Like, fear is not like an enemy. Fear is not the bad guy. I think of that. Was it Winston Churchill who said, the only thing to fear is fear itself? I can't remember if it was him or whoever it was. And I remember in my early experiences with ayahuasca, in fact, in my book right now, the chapter that I've been in the process of writing for a couple of months now is really about fear, in some core ways. The early ayahuasca experiences that I had, so much of them were about fear and what fear is, what room or space it maybe should ideally occupy in my psyche, as opposed to, what space it occupies when it's acting destructively. Mars is a god of fear. Pluto, also Hades, right? Associated with the underworld, associated with fear. So there's a kind of ominous quality that comes around, especially when we talk about Mars, Pluto, Mars, Uranus. Eliminating that altogether would be dishonest, in my opinion. Just saying there's nothing to fear in this transit would be, I think, disingenuous, because there is a way in which the intensity and the experience of fear are creative in nature. The Buddhist tradition talks about this at length. Most mystical traditions talk about a kind of sacredness that fear contains. There's a sacred fear and trembling. I remember reading Kierkegaard in college as a philosophy major, and so appreciating how he talked about the sacred side of fear. There's a holy, reverent, sacred fear. I am small in the face of overwhelming energies and forces, and I'm not all powerful. And there's a very tentative, fragile, vulnerable feeling that comes with life, that we kind of quiver and shake inside because of that vulnerability. But when we recognize that as also a symptom or a sign of how precious and rare and beautiful life is, we can start to have a slightly healthier, or just an appreciation for that fear. I have noticed it amplified in my life a great deal since having kids. I mean, maybe since I was in those ayahuasca experiences early on in my 20s, coming out of an addiction phase in my life, and that was really crucial for me to understand the extent to which fear was informing some of my choices. I don't feel safe. I don't feel happy. I don't feel okay. But this drug makes me feel safe, happy, and okay. So a lot of my addiction was about facing underlying fears, anxieties, insecurities that were driving compulsive substance abuse patterns. But then later in life, when I had children, it's like, oh, I'm in a much healthier space. But now I'm having to hold the hands of my two girls through their experience of fear, like the overwhelming fear of just being in existence as a kid, and whether it's nighttime or darkness or going to school for the first time. And like helping create a sacredness where I don't try to shoo that away, right? I'm not just going to say, get away because everything's good here. There's nothing to see. I think that dismissal of fear, I don't think it's helpful. And I think most sensitive parents don't approach it that way. Yeah, it is scary to go to school for the first time, or yeah, it is scary to have to go up in front of my daughter yesterday, had to give a presentation on a change maker, and she had to get up in front of the class and present her change maker. She chose Selena Gomez because Selena Gomez is someone she really likes, who has advocated for children's mental health. And so she did a little presentation on Selena Gomez. And she was so nervous and so afraid. And both my wife and I are like, it is scary and you're going to do it. There's that fear is a critical creative energy that is part of the shaping of a version of courage and self-confidence and um like a sense that like life is risky, but it's good. So I want to say that with Mars Pluto, the kind of fear that we should be embracing around this transit is the fear that comes with transformation. It's the fear that comes with confronting or facing things or working through things that are pushing us into an edge. And if we can recognize that there is an evolutionary beauty and intelligence and safety that's actually there within fear, when we remember that we're eternal beings, that we are never really born, we never really die. That's my firm belief. That's what ancient astrologers believed in both the East and West, that we are immortal spirit souls in bodies. From that perspective, when we really have to lean into the truth of that perspective, then when we deal with fear, we can trust this fear cannot erase me as a being. Any danger that comes to me, any harm that comes to me, can't blot me out of creation or existence. And we learn that and we start to trust that in moments where we have to face and confront things that are scary or that we're just afraid or it pushes us to an edge or we find it overwhelming or we're not sure that we can handle the energy coming through or something like that. But we go through that experience. And it's just the going through it that usually matters the most. It's not how you perform. It's just you just went through it. I remember my first ayahuasca ceremonies, holy cow, in the morning, I was just like, that was the scariest thing I've ever done in my entire life. Every single time for like the first 30 or 40 ceremonies I went through, it's like, that was the scariest shit of all time. I'd be like, and so many times the message that I got from the wonderful facilitators, the indigenous curanderos and so forth was, it doesn't matter what happened during it, how well you performed, how well you did or didn't deal with the fear. You made it through. And the promise of being a soul is that you will always make it through. There's no experience in creation that you are not designed to make it through. That reality is midwifing your spiritual enlightenment process, and there's no getting it wrong, ultimately, right? There's lots of relatively consequential things that we deal with day to day in this world, in this lifetime, or the next, or whatever, but ultimately, you can't mess this up. And when we face fear and we go through these little evolutionary vortexes that are a little edgy and scary, but we can remember our spiritual nature, then I really think it takes the performance anxiety out. And it takes away things like expectations and attachments that we have to various outcomes. And it says, look, don't worry about what's going to happen or what will or you will or will not get it right. Just find the courage in your heart. You can do this and you'll get through it. And then paradoxically, no matter what happened or how you handled it, you just trust a little bit more deeply. You feel a little stronger in your heart, the seat of your actual being. I want to say that first because anything we talk about on a mundane level with Mars, Pluto, like, oh, your relationships are going to transform or your job's going to transform or your life philosophy or whatever it may be. The edge that we feel, the transformative force, there's nothing required other than we just do our best and go through it. And acknowledging that that can be scary, but it's good. It's okay, right? I think that has to be our starting point with a transit like this. Otherwise, you start getting into the mundane things like Mars Pluto creates violent purgatorial discharges of pent up energy, or you get into that and you're just like, Jesus, That's like, we just have to safeguard our hearts and our consciousness as we go through experiences like this. Just remember, like, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. I am a being of light, love. I live in my heart. I will be okay. I can face fears. It doesn't matter how I perform. I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to keep growing and evolving. So that out of the way, let's talk now about Mars Pluto. When we're going to do some horoscopes right now, and what I'm going to do is bring up some of the ancient philosophical tensions that existed in the Indian tradition around the house pairings. This is a really fascinating way of looking at the Mars-Pluto opposition as a horoscope, because it's going to take the topics of the houses that we're all familiar with, that you've heard me address a million times if you've been watching my channel for a while, but it's going to put them into the perspective of different philosophical needs within the human soul that are a part of a human lifetime. I want to tell you about those areas before we get into it so that you're familiar with the language I'm about to use. First of all, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. I almost completely spaced and forgot where I was. That I'm even a human. I just almost forgot. So Dharma has to do in these 4 pursuits in the Indian astrological tradition are woven into the houses. There are 3 Dharma houses, 3 Artha houses, 3 Kama houses, 3 Moksha houses. I've been exploring these in my masterclass series this year. The Dharma houses are 1, 5, and 9, and those houses have to do with that which makes us essentially ourselves. The process of being a soul with a character that is unique to this lifetime, that is evolving and growing, the means by which we learn and grow that are fundamental to our actual physical, psychological makeup, and what is natural to us, in the same way that fire can't be fire unless it's hot and light. There's something that makes Adam, Adam, and that makes everyone listening here themselves. That fundamental sense of selfhood that is unique to this lifetime, that you're here to get in touch with, that will be part of how you learn and grow. Those are the Dharma houses. Now, the Artha houses have to do, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's hard to focus on spiritual evolution if you're struggling to survive materially, or if you feel like your material sense of well-being, comfort, ease, or even a degree of pleasure is completely absent. So for Indian astrologers, Artha is another pursuit in human life that has to do with material comfort, ease, security, pleasure, things like money, house, food, clothing on the most basic level, going up to, grander, more opulent states, which also then get complicated because if you don't have enough sort of wealth and security, it's hard to really take time to be concerned with personal and spiritual growth because you're just trying to survive. Again, like Maslow's hierarchy. But then on the other hand, if you have too much or it becomes too important, it'll distract you from spiritual life. So it's a necessary part, but something we also have to balance. In the same way that Dharma, if you're overly concerned with yourself and not invested in the happiness that exists in human relationships, you'll become self-centered. So there's like a dark and light to all these philosophical areas. Kama is the next one. Kama as in the Kama Sutra, like bliss, happiness, sensual embodiment, and connection with other beings, and the happiness that comes through human relationships, and sensuality and connection with other human souls or animals, whatever. So Kama houses, the Artha houses are 2, 10, and 6. You can think of those. They're all connected by trines. And the Kama houses are 7, 3, and 11. So these are social and rooted in the experience of pleasure and satisfaction derived from human relationships. And then moksha. And moksha is the concern of like spiritual liberation. It can also be very mundane, like houses 4, 8, and 12 are the moksha houses. They are all connected to the pursuit of liberation from worldly suffering and entanglement. So spiritual enlightenment, but also, rest in your living room with Netflix at night is in a sense moksha, liberation from your workaday world. So mundane and spiritual forms of release or liberation or detachment or relinquishment of entanglements and suffering in the world is the concern of moksha. All of these concerns are natural to a human lifetime, according to Indian philosophy and astrology. So we're going to use those 4 areas that are a part of, one of them is a part of every single house. And we're going to look at the binary between these 2 areas through the Mars-Pluto opposition for all 12 signs. So in doing this, we will be pairing 2 signs at a time together, since we're just looking at the 2 signs that will be flipped on the ascendant. So for example, when I start with Aries, this will be a horoscope for Aries and Libra, because we can just flip-flop the 2 positions. And then we'll go through the next 2 binaries, Taurus and Scorpio, like that. So, alrighty. I'm going to put the chart up on the screen, and let's refresh on the basic transit data. It's like, just remind ourselves of what we're talking about before we talk about it. So what you can see here on the screen is Mars is about to oppose Pluto. It's going to happen on my wife's birthday, which is the 26th on Saturday. So she's got a memorable, what do you call it, solar return chart. I had Mars-Uranus on my solar return, so that was wild. Let's see. Emily says, Masterclass series this year is amazing. Not too late to join the spring series. That's right. It's not. You can also catch up, join all of them, and catch up on the first three houses that we studied. Okay, let's see here. Okay. So Mars, Pluto right now, as of Thursday, April 24th, if you're watching this during the live stream itself, is about a degree away from perfecting. If you've been feeling the energy ramping up, if you've been hitting that edge, if you've been feeling that kind of sacred anxiety we were talking about, it's very normal. If you've not been feeling anything, that's okay too. It's not like, a lot of this will depend on where it's activated in your chart, right? So, but it is a big transit. A lot of people will notice it in other people's lives around them or in your workspace or whatever, in the collective, certainly. I think it's fascinating. I don't know if the conclave is still taking place with the passing of the Pope. First of all, I have to say, when I made some of the videos I made in the past month or two on the passing of solar figures with Neptune and Saturn entering Aries shortly, I, honest to God, wasn't aware that either the Pope was sick or that the king of the king was sick. So those were really, I'm not surprised because the archetypes are, they're pretty predictable, but pretty powerful examples of some solar figures that have been going through some turbulence. Obviously, the passing of the Pope, the replacing of the position of papal power under a Mars-Pluto dynamic is fascinating. I watched the Oscar-nominated film The Conclave. I have to say, if you haven't seen that, that was a beautiful movie. I absolutely loved it. So I've been thinking about that a lot. I'll say more about that in a minute, but we had a Sun, Mars, Pluto T-square this week. We've been talking about that a little bit. This opposition is going to come through on Saturday, April 26th. So you're going to see them perfecting. I think it's about 7 p.m. Central Time, USA, Saturday night, that Mars is perfectly opposite Pluto. Now, if I take this forward and give it 3 degrees of separation, which is the standard for ancient astrologers, what's really fascinating is that Pluto turns retrograde about a week from now, Saturday, May 3rd, as Mars is just separating from the opposition to Pluto within that 3-degree range. That means this is the first full retrograde of Pluto in the sign of Aquarius without a retrograde back into Capricorn that we will have experienced. And it's pretty fascinating to see how tightly that change of direction for Pluto has coincided with Mars oppositions. Pluto was peaking at 29 Capricorn in late 2024 as Mars opposed it at 29 Cancer. Then it turned retrograde in Leo and went back and opposed Pluto just after it had entered Aquarius. Now it's coming back to oppose in direct motion, and surprise, surprise, Pluto's turning retrograde. So next Friday, I've already recorded Pluto in Aquarius horoscopes for all of you guys, Pluto retrograde horoscopes, so you can kind of reflect on maybe what process of initial revisions or reflections are taking place in that whole sign house of Aquarius. That'll be more focused next Friday for you guys. Today, again, we're going to focus on both placements. So what I want to do now, given that we have this coming through on Saturday, is let's isolate everything but Mars and Pluto from our perspective on the chart here. And then let's look at these philosophical areas of life. Now, I'm going to back this up just a little bit to get us into the opposition. And then we're going to go and put Aries on the ascendant. All right. Someone says, I have to mention this comment really quickly. Someone says, I watched Conclave on my flight from Europe yesterday. Yeah, it's funny. Like I watched mine on my spring break. Our family went on spring break. I watched it on the airplane myself. So I guess it's an airplane kind of movie. But anyhow, all right. So here's our Aries Libra access. So if you are listening and you are an Aries rising or a Libra rising, or if you regularly listen to Aries or Libra sun sign horoscopes, you could listen either way for this one. What we're looking at across this axis is the 11th and 5th whole sign houses being activated. So this, I'm going to use a little text tool to help me so that you can remember this. We're going to call it, there we go. So across this house axis, again, you can just flip this and it would be Pluto in the 5th or Mars in the 11th if you're a Libra rising. Same archetypal tension philosophically for this exercise. Comma in the 11th versus Dharma in the 5th. The comma of the 11th house is the pleasure and the bliss, the realization of dreams, hopes, and aspirations that are societal, that are public, that are professional, that are social, communal in nature. So the 11th house was called the joy of Jupiter by ancient Hellenistic astrologers, and it was associated with our aspirations, dreams, wishes, and happiness as it is tied into the 10th house that it flanks. So the 10th house has to do with our aspirations professionally, publicly, in terms of vocation or civic and social involvement. And the 10th house is really concerned with arta, which means, the means by which we secure things materially in the world that give us a sense of happiness, pleasure, comfort, stability. And so the 11th house is really about the happiness or pleasure that's also connected to that public, vocational, civic, social arena. It's also about the social connections that we have or make that bring us a certain degree of happiness and that are pretty intimately tied to things like material wealth or abundance or security. So when you think of the 11th house, you think about the social dimension of your life that grants happiness and that is pretty closely linked to things like career and social aspirations. In this sense, the communities are tied together by mutual interests or similar values or beliefs or similar goals. And so this house is being activated right now in this opposition for both Aries and Libra. Now, the 5th house as a Dharma house has to do, it was called the house of good fortune and the place of Venus's joy for ancient Hellenistic astrologers. And this house is associated with that which makes me happy, that is fundamental to my authentic selfhood. It's like, if you think about it, one of the most common things that happens when I see people going through, dating stories in astrological consulting is it really boils down to, do I derive pleasure and happiness? And do I have enough of the same thumbs up or likes as the person that I'm dating? You need to have a shared vocabulary of pleasure, not just physically and chemically in your physical intimacy, which is obviously important, but there needs to be a sense that we both value and like similar things. The easiest indicator for me of relational disharmony is when they're like, my spouse or my partner just occupies a totally different hemisphere of values and likes and interests than I do, and we just have a hard time sharing joy together. So take that as a kind of metaphor. The 5th house Dharma has to do with what makes us essentially ourselves. In modern astrology, we incorrectly associate the 5th house with creativity and conflate it with Leo, which it was never associated with. Pleasure, satisfaction that is derived from being in touch with our authentic selfhood, that inherently has to be expressed in relationships with other beings and may also find outlets in creative activities. Like if you derive pleasure from playing music or dancing or anything that's Venusian, you'll find it in the 5th house. But it's deeper than just creativity. It really has to do with the pleasure, the role that pleasure plays in character and the soul. And satisfaction creatively is just one part of that. So when you're thinking about these two houses, you're talking really about the kind of pleasure that is essential to my own character, that is completely and utterly unique to my soul, and then the kind of pleasure that I derive socially that is based on various kinds of social, professional, material concerns. Both are valid forms of pleasure. But, and this is why the two houses were called the joy of Venus and Jupiter, but they have competing interests. Sometimes the social pleasure we seek that is, in some ways opportunistic or really advantageous to some of our material goals and our security and comfort and the things we value with other people, will be at odds or will have some level of conflict with what is most creatively and individually authentic in our pleasure body. Like, as an individual, I derive pleasure and happiness and satisfaction from X, Y, and Z, but socially or publicly or communally, there may be different factors or different elements that are at odds. So for both Libras and Aries right now, your horoscope is really about the tension between these two areas. What kinds of conflicts or tensions are coming up energetically that you have to work with or face right now as a matter of your spiritual growth and evolution? That's how I'm looking at this for the Libra and Aries axis in general. It doesn't really matter so much to me which direction you flip it in. Those tensions are fundamental to the houses in any kind of opposition. So that's a good way to look at it from. All right, let's go on now to our next pairing. And you'll see that some of these are going to repeat, but in different ways. So for Taurus and Scorpio, I'm putting Taurus on the ascendant, but you could listen to this for Scorpio rising as well, or if you like your Taurus or Scorpio sun signs, that works as well. This happens to be my own horoscope because I'm a Taurus rising. So we've got the opposition between the two planets, Mars and Pluto, taking place across the 4th and 10th houses. Now, I'm going to once again highlight that this is now Arta versus Moksha. Now, this is fascinating because we would often talk about these houses as career versus home and family. Not wrong at all to look at it through that lens. Career, public facing, place of recognition, status, authority, work in the world, civic social engagement with the society in which you live, versus the home, the family, the private sphere of life, maybe parental or ancestral dynamics, property. So those are the mundane levels of the houses. But at a deeper philosophical level, Indian astrologers look at this as the split between Arta and Moksha. With Arta, we're thinking, look, I have to survive. I have to pay bills. I need food. I ideally need some space to maybe go to the gym or have hobbies. I need to have a social life. I need to have there's all of these things that we need for a human life that I think if we're honest about, even if we say, oh, I don't need so much, we really do. We need satisfying relationships. We need some things that we like doing. We need a job, hopefully, that pays us enough, and so on and so forth. The 10th house is really so much about the effort that we put in to have enough resources and success and recognition or mastery over skills and trades that we can sustain and provide for all the other needs of life. And it's a very modest goal. I mean, it's at the top of the chart, so it gets all of the hype around things like, it gets all of the attention around words like power and, wealth or mastery, all of which have kind of a dark connotation at a certain point. But it's really a very modest house for Indian astrologers in the sense that, it's natural for humans to have to, be successful on a certain level materially. But that focus, it runs contrary in some ways to the focus of Moksha in the 4th house. Think about going to bed at night, or think about laying in Shavasana on a yoga mat, or think about the spiritual pursuit of enlightenment, quiet time, solitude, meditation, prayer, an inner life that is peaceful and unconcerned with the constant urges or needs of the body and survival and bills and mortgages and all this kind of stuff. think about the inner life that needs to turn off the news or stop doom scrolling because otherwise we're going to go crazy. So it's not that one's right or wrong, but there's a tension between these two spaces in life. And how do we work with that tension right now? If you're a Scorpio or a Taurus, there's an energetic pressure in both directions. There's things that are peaking maybe right now with respect to your career, transformation in the workplace, societal engagement, public or political ideologies that are really driving the plot forward. And also the need for an inner life that's free from the entanglements of the world, that's about peace, or that's about a feeling of ease, comfort, and safety. So, how are we working with that tension right now if you're a Taurus or Scorpio? So, that's how I'm thinking about that one. Let's move on to the next binary here with Gemini and Sagittarius. So, for Gemini and Sag, we have our first, really our first cadent houses, excuse me. So, these two houses are going to bring the Dharma and Kama distinction back. So Dharma in the ninth house versus Kama in the third. This is a fascinating pairing of houses. This will be something that you can listen to if you're a Gemini rising or a Sagittarius rising. Doesn't matter. The same binary is active if we flip it in either direction. So when you think about Dharma in the ninth house, what you're really thinking about is the way in which, for ancient Indian philosophers and astrologers, the ninth house, of course, is associated with things like higher learning, religion, piety, faith, spirituality, universities, pilgrimage, travel abroad, usually with a spiritual connotation behind it. It's a place of teachers and gurus, the place of morality. Now, that ninth house is called Dharma because the sense of Dharma as a religious function in the soul is natural to Indian philosophy, which means that as a soul, not all souls are going to necessarily experience this, but in ancient Indian like classical culture, this was sort of baked into the culture of India. You're taught that you're a spirit soul. It's amazing to me, even visiting India today, how much more prevalent the sense of the sacred is. There's like a temple on every corner. It was so amazing to me. Not that there isn't just a mundane, material, secular reality in India. I'm not saying that at all. It's just it's not like the US. Like you can imagine if you were driving everywhere and in every strip mall, you also saw a temple to Shiva or something. It's just a different vibe. Anyway, and I really appreciated it when I was there a couple times. Your innate function as a soul is to learn and grow spiritually. And to be in accord with your authentic nature is to also act morally in the world. So the version of yourself that is authentic is not only about your unique characters or quirks or traits or creative abilities or interests or what brings you pleasure, but it's also how good are you in terms of your virtue. And every soul has its virtues and those that it is learning and cultivating through spiritual faith, piety, learning, teachers, gurus. So the ninth house is about how we continue to cultivate the virtue of our soul and its dharma in this lifetime through faith, learning, morality, etc. It's also a house that's connected to the good karma that springs from virtuous living and from moral and spiritual practices. That's fascinating on its own. It's like, that's a very interesting way to look at it. And the third house is really fascinating because it's a Kama house. And it also has this really interesting relationship in Indian astrology with learning and education. Although it how can I put this? Well, I heard one Indian astrologer put it this way. The third house has a lot to do with the cultivation of skills and abilities that bring you a sense of social prestige and satisfaction. It's like it's an interesting house because it's almost like a very competitive and athletic house, mentally and intellectually, for Indian astrologers, where you're developing a lot of skills and abilities and resources, but they're all a part of what brings you a feeling of being like integrated or maybe even a little popular or competent and adjusted socially. And also that they kind of give you a feeling, the third house sort of gives you a feeling of like I'm liked. And that there's a happiness that we derive from being like liked by other people. Well, you can see where the binary naturally sets up. There's an aspect of learning that has to do with piety, faith, doing the right thing, learning about universal truths, applying them in our lives, growing and evolving spiritually as we understand these greater teachings of the universe. That there's also a very basic way in which we need to learn and grow and develop street smarts and skills and abilities and a sense of healthy pride and respect for who we are and what we're good at or how likable we are. And so that binary across the third and the ninth can come into tension, right? It's like, um, you know, the, if you're so spiritual that you're not likable, like that's a problem, But if you're so likable and concerned with popularity or being skilled or good at things or being smart that you lack a higher perspective, that's also problematic. So these two houses have a tension that comes up around how much we need to honor and recognize our own intelligence, our own likability, our own brightness, and then also be able to follow something bigger than ourselves. That's a simple way of putting it. Both are really important. You can't be a human, like anyone who's been around people who are very pious and religious, but like very boring and lack like a sparkle and a light of their own, you're looking at all ninth, no third, But if you see someone who's got personality, intelligence, charm, humor, skill, wit, and they're also really reverent and humble, and they have a balance between those two things, you're looking at a pretty good creative relationship between the third and the ninth, just to use an example. So right now for Geminis and Sages, this is where the tension is at. It's between these two areas, or maybe even cropping up in terms of the people that you do or don't want to be around. Are you with people who are just way too fanatical about things? Or are you with people who have no reverence for things bigger than themselves and are just all about self? The other interesting part of this is the connection with siblings, competitors, peers, and social competition, and how larger beliefs or values have to insert themselves within that very social realm that contains concerns with people who are basically our peers or equals. And siblings would fall into that category as well. And, things can come up around siblings that are just unique to the karma unfolding in the lives of our siblings or our relationships with them for either Geminis or Sages right now. So let's move on to Cancer and Capricorn. So if you can listen to this for either Cancer or Capricorn, and we're just flipping the two houses in either way. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put up the tension between these two houses. We're repeating the two philosophical areas are opposed across all the houses in the same way. So here we have Artha versus Moksha again. And this is consistent across the Capricorn Cancer axis because it will be flipped 2 and 8 for Mars and Pluto in either direction. Now, across these two houses, most people are familiar with these houses in terms of material resources, income, things like maybe your values or something like that. Most of the time, people make the connection between values in the second house because of a common mistake that modern astrologers made, which was to conflate signs with houses. In ancient astrology, that conflation doesn't exist. And so medical astrology, there's a correlation, but other than that, the topics of the houses have a totally different rationale. So it's not really accurate to say the second house is a place of values unless you mean very specifically the material things that we value that give us security, comfort, or pleasure. The second house was associated with everything we have, develop, cultivate that contributes to security, pleasure, comfort, ease, stability in the material world. It's about what we possess or what we own or what we develop or cultivate through effort. which is why, like the third house, the second house was associated for Indian astrologers with the development of skills and abilities, insofar as those skills and abilities contributed to material comfort, ease, or security. So that's our second house. You can see the connection to things like money and so forth. Arta ideally is about saying, look, unless I don't have to constantly fret and worry about my safety, security, or survival, it's going to be hard to develop meaningful relationships or psychological space and time for growth. Like, let's be real. One of, I think, the main reasons that, as a business, one of my core values and one way that we try to give back at Nightlight is through financial accessibility. The reason that I believe so deeply in that is that I think, growing up a preacher's kid, by the way, and seeing this at play in a dad who put 60 to 70 hours a week in tending the congregation, but got paid like less than a school teacher, really, I feel like I just watched a tension that exists between the spiritual and the material growing up in a really profound way. And my deep belief, and this is going to dovetail into the 8th house in a second, my deep belief is that there should be accessibility to spiritual or psychological things. I believe that there should be more insurance providing for therapy, right? That's just a big belief of mine. I don't bring a lot of my kind of beliefs politically into the work that I do. But one belief I have is that spiritual things should be accessible for people of all different socioeconomic backgrounds, because it's not fair that people should have to fight to survive and then not have access to things that are about the quality of your inner life, just because the financial circumstances are often grossly unjust in our world. So that's a belief, right? Not surprisingly, I have a Mars-Neptune opposition in my chart across the 2nd and 8th. The reason I say this is because the 8th house is a place of moksha, which has to do with the relinquishment of worldly attachments. So it's a really interesting house, because one of the ways that we relinquish attachments to worldly things is through loss, is through death, is through having things taken away from us and having to deal with a more basic reality of impermanence. Oh, well, your material things can only give you so much security and comfort. This is why it's called the house of debts. This is why it is a place of karmic entanglements and soul contracts that both give to us and take away. The 8th house as a moksha house is really about, ultimately the balance with the second is, can I live in the world, pay my bills, feel a certain degree of happiness or satisfaction, while also living with the tension of the fact that I will die, I can't take things with me, everything has to be given back. There is a give and take. The price to live a human life is to die a human life for all of us, right? That's the 8th house reality as a basic feature of the human experience on Earth. Everyone pays the same price to come in here and dance the dance. We all leave eventually. So that 8th house moksha is about the big, huge death, but also the little everyday deaths that have to do with impermanence. How much can you really secure here? How much can you really have here? How deeply do you really hold on here? How co-opted are your relationships by using one another to try and prop up as much artificial and illusory security or happiness as you can get within a lifetime? Those relationships are the problematic relationships of the 8th house. Whereas the give and take of relationships that give and take beautifully with an awareness of impermanence, with an awareness of the temporary nature of material things, can also be very beautiful, which is why the 8th house is also called a place of inheritance. So when we think about this binary, what we're thinking about is the tension between what we need to build, what we need to cultivate, material security, comfort, ease, as an authentic need in human life, versus the constant pressure and force of impermanence, of relinquishment, the fact that we can't do it alone, that we have to give and take and share in order for material ease to be facilitated. I think all the time about the fact that, the little financially accessible philosophy of Nightlight is so Mars-Neptune across the 2nd and 8th. If I'm doing well, but there isn't some built-in philosophy to make sure that people who aren't doing as well aren't just like eliminated from being able to learn or take from the offerings that we have, it doesn't feel right to me. I feel like That was one of the, when I was in an ayahuasca ceremony and Nightlight had just started in 2010. And I was sitting there going, like, what's the model I'm going to use for this business? And I had an ayahuasca ceremony that it took me back to when I was a kid, and my mom couldn't afford a lot of things, including dental work. So we were taken to the University of Minnesota, where you could get free dental work if the students in the dentistry school got to do your work for their practice. And so all of a sudden in ayahuasca vision, I was taken back to that memory. And I thought, oh, there it is. I'm going to do donation-based work, and I'm going to get a chance to grow as an astrologer, but in exchange, I'm going to give people a flexible pricing. So for the first year, I did everything by donation. I got about 500 clients in my first year. It was incredible learning. And from that, the same model grew. It was like, let's make sure that if I'm growing, it's because there's room for other people to grow in a way that's accessible. So that came through an ayahuasca vision for me. It was very second, eighth house. Not surprisingly, what was being activated during that time was my Mars-Neptune opposition. So across the second and eighth. I tell that story just for the sake of highlighting or illustrating what Cancers or Capricorns might be going through right now. You know, the tension between what is shared, what is mine, what I need, and what has to be relinquished, attachments that are being released, and things that I also need to build and secure. So think about those tensions between Artha and Moksha. All right, let's go on to, oops. There we go. So we get to the Leo and Aquarius axis. So this is good for you if you are either a Leo or an Aquarius rising. The tension is the same. We're just flipping the houses on the two. So here we come back to that familiar binary once again between, Dharma versus Kama. You notice that they're the same in all of the Dharma houses opposed to a Kama house. This is because there is a fundamental philosophical tension in the Indian tradition between the cultivation of authentic selfhood, that without which I would not be me, and the need for social adaptation and pleasure that is derived from harmonizing self with others, which of course includes a level of compromise. When we're thinking about Leo and Aquarius, we're talking about, this is me. Without this, I will not be me. That for some people might be a matter of emotional, psychic, or even physical life or death. It could be that extreme. But for a lot of people, it won't be necessarily on that level. It'll just be on the level of like, look, I don't know how happy I can be unless I'm being myself, unless I'm developing and evolving along a track that calls my name as sweetly as the sound of music, you know? And if I'm not following that, then I'm not doing well. I'm not going to feel right. Any good results will be tainted by the sting of dissatisfaction that I still feel inside because I'm not being me. Then on the other hand, there's the reality of Kama in the seventh house, as in the Kama Sutra, as in it takes two to tango. Your selfhood cannot be authentically experienced without the mirroring provided by other people. I was reading a new book by Liz Green, which, by the way, you guys, if there is any book I could recommend, everything Liz Green has written will contribute to your understanding of astrology wonderfully. She just wrote a new book, or a new book was published from a previous talk she gave or something. It's called By Jove, and it's on Jupiter. I read it on the flight to Las Vegas, and then on the flight back. It was 300 pages. I devoured it. It was so good, so wonderful. She talked at length in one chapter about narcissism from a clinical psychological sort of perspective. One thing that she said, and I don't know if this is true or not, it resonated with me because there are some people who have literally been diagnosed in my family tree, let's say. And so I was, oh, yeah, this makes sense the way she explained it. She said, sometimes, and I don't think she said all the time, but sometimes narcissism develops in a child early on from the trauma of not having a primary parent or parents mirror them. So I was like, I have to think about that. The way she explained it was like this. She said, when your selfhood, what makes you authentically special and beautiful and unique, is mirrored adequately by parental figures, you develop a strong, healthy love of self. In the case that it's not, or worse than not being mirrored, which could be through neglect or ignorance or self-absorbed narcissistic parents or like whatever the case might be. And by the way, she doesn't love how we just throw that word around so much. So I'm not certainly not encouraging that. But um, she did say, in the case that a child is not being mirrored, you're authentic, you're beautiful, you're interesting, you're unique, and they're being ignored, or worse, they're being abused, they're being told you're worthless, or they're only being shown, you get some good feedback or mirroring only when you are a person that makes me feel good about myself. You know, when a parent is like that, these can be triggers to developing a narcissist personality disorder or a kind of narcissistic wounding or something like that. And she was saying, you know, behind the narcissist is not necessarily someone who thinks that they're better than everyone, but someone who may feel deeply invalid or not seen or loved, or may actually have deep insecurities. Now, I'm not trying to present some kind of official psychological perspective. This is just me kind of reporting on what she wrote in the book that I found so interesting. The reason I'm bringing this up is because with Mars and Pluto across the 1st and 7th, I think it may be easy right now for Leos or Aquarians to feel like if you have a history of feeling insecure or of not having that mirroring happen for you, if there are wounds, not necessarily full-blown narcissism or anything, but if there's like wounds of not feeling like you've been seen or valued or loved or mirrored in previous relationships or in the current relationship, it's a very real chance that right now the pot is going to boil over and you're going to say, I can't be in a relationship where I don't get to be seen and actually be myself. Or if someone else is bulldozing or steamrolling you. Or you could be getting feedback, I'm sure some of us are, that you're the one doing that. And maybe there's not full-blown narcissism, but maybe there's some ego there that the dimmer switch needs to turn down so that someone you're with can step up a little bit. I don't think there is any more noble, courageous, bold thing that we can do than to say, look, because I sometimes have a big ego, I'm not going to take that personally. Because I am beautiful and worthwhile, even if sometimes I struggle with my ego, I'm just going to learn to turn it down. I don't have to be threatened by this. You know, I think about the times that ayahuasca helped me the most. It was like, you got a big ego. Okay. Just got to turn it down. It's not bad to have an ego. It's not bad to be you. You just got to turn it down a little bit, give more space for others to shine just like you shine. You're going to be a lot happier because people are going to like you even more. Trust me. This is like the message I'm getting from the medicine. I'm like, okay, let's do it. What do I have to be threatened by? There's a plant talking to me apparently. So, you know, it's like, let's try it. So, but the point here is there a good, healthy form of mirroring taking place, right? Like, are you getting what you need in the feedback, in the mirror of the other soul that you're with? Or are you providing that in a healthy way for someone else? Also, there are conflicts of value with respect to, you know, like there's that classic battle of like, in order for me to be happy, you have to change and become more like me, or you have to change and become more like what I need for happiness. There's a certain level at which if it weren't for my wife and her needs and her definition of happiness, I would not have become half of the person that I am today, because I know that I took some risks of becoming someone a little different. And I did it for her because I love her, right? And she's done the same for me. And because we've both been able to do that without compromising too much of ourselves, I really believe that's been one of the secrets to our success, at least, 14 years into our marriage, and hopefully many more. And I see that in friendships too. It's like, can I become a little bit more of what you need and not feel like I'm losing myself? Two things can be true. I can compromise without losing myself. Can we do that right now? These are big questions. I don't know if any signs are getting it more than Leo and Aquarius with this one, honestly. Okay, well. Okay. So last but not least, we will go into our Virgo-Pisces axis. So now we come across maybe the most enigmatic, mystical pairing of houses in 6 and 12. And these two houses are going to give us, again, moksha versus artha. The work of the world versus liberation from the world. Familiar, right? So for Virgo and Pisces, you can listen to this if you're Virgo rising or Pisces rising. Either way, you have the same exact opposition across the same houses, which bring up the same fundamental tensions. So, with the 12th house version of moksha, we are often talking about those liberations of from the material world that come through really difficult events. For example, dissociation, mental or emotional health crises, hospitalization, disease. When those things are taking you, remember, this is connected to the first house. So the moksha of the 12th takes you out of your body. It takes you out of your sense of the ego and this lifetime and any control you have at the steering wheel of the ship of your life. The 12th is about taking that away from you for the sake of liberation, which is often scary, and why the place is called the house of Saturn and the house of the evil spirit and other ominous things like that. It's not really because it's evil or bad, but it is insofar as none of us really want to relinquish control of the ship, control of the ego, conscious understanding, or control of our lives. Now, when we're deliberate, when we go and read in a library or sit in meditation or go on a silent retreat, the 12th house can be a very different kind of experience. And there's many ways in which the 12th house will show up as the mystical experiences that separate us from ego or control or the body, but are beautiful. And we don't experience them as terrifying or anything like that. I think this is why many modern astrologers started associating Neptune with Pisces in the 12th. But again, kind of a separate conversation from the Hellenistic way of looking at things. Either way, the 12th has to do with the relinquishment from the world, from ego, from body, that gives us an eternal perspective. Oh yeah, I'm a spirit soul that's enlightening through a human experience. Like I think of, was it The Police or was it Sting who did We Are Spirits in the Material World? Like it's like that. Now the 6th house is interesting because the 6th house is fundamentally shares some of the same connection to suffering that the 12th house does. But there's more of a connotation of material slavery in the 6th house. Whereas in the 12th, there's almost this sense of spiritual liberation, although sometimes through the same kind of suffering that the 6th entails. For example, they're both houses of disease and sickness. At the same time, the 6th house is, because it's an artha house, it's concerned with work in the world, with security, comfort, ease in the world. However, the 6th house is thought to be a place where we struggle to do that. We persevere, we overcome obstacles, we sacrifice, we work, we sweat, we labor. So houses 2 and 10 are a little cushier on the material level. The 6th house is like, look, if you're going to become a great musician, you're going to have to, your fingers are going to have to bleed. If you're going to become anything that's worth achieving or get any matter of wealth or security or comfort in the material world, there's going to be competition, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be hard work. You might have to work jobs that you hate. Or for a lot of people, you always work jobs that you hate. And I'm not saying that's necessarily just a 6th house thing, but the connotation of the 6th house philosophically is that material survival is a kind of indentured servitude that we have to the material world, which is why in India, a material world is often, talked about as Maya or illusion, something that if we get lost in, we become enslaved to. So the 6th house has this, kind of darker side of the artha spectrum philosophically. But at the same time, no one's going to deny that if you care about something, if you care about the welfare of other souls and their struggles materially, you might be very charitable. You might be very service oriented. This is kind of good karma of the 6th house. I don't think it's any surprise that Nightlight, with a concern for financial welfare and accessibility, like, I have 3 planets in Libra in the 6th. Someone who has been really, like, at times a workaholic, right? I've struggled with that at times. That's a 6th house thing. But the 6th house is really about what chains us to the material world, which we can be relinquished from when we marry something of the sixth house to sacrifice and service, whether it's developing something that you care about, a practice, a skill, an ability, a job, or if it's sacrifice and service to the social welfare of other beings. The sixth house has those things in mind. So when Virgos and Pisces are looking at this opposition right now, we're thinking of the balance between this otherworldly emphasis, the detachment from the world that sometimes is provoked through suffering or sickness or deliberate spiritual retreat. And we're thinking about the sacrifice and engagement with the world through acts of service and sacrifice. What is a meaningful form of work and sacrifice and effort? So you can see how these two areas are pushing and pulling against one another. Where are you going to go? Into the world or out of it? What forms of sacrifice can be married to some healthy detachment from the world, right? It's interesting how when we work in service for things, it may actually help us to facilitate a transcendental perspective, even while we're working in the world. So, I think the marriage of these two houses brings up questions of, the deeper spiritual values and commitments that we have right now. So, okay, let me now, if I can, okay, I can get this out of the way. So we leave that perspective there for Virgos and Pisces. Now we've made it through all of the whole sign house binaries at this point. So I hope that was useful for you guys and that you find some meaningful connections there. And that gives you, it's fun to take this perspective once in a while, because I think it gives us some deeper things to chew on than just the topics themselves, which can sometimes be, it's like you hear them so many times. So sometimes they just sort of fall flat. So I like to dig in deeper. All right. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take a quick 2-minute bathroom break. I'm going to come back. We're going to open up for some Q&A. We're going to do some Q&A, and then I'm going to do some birth chart readings. By the way, thank you so much to the people who have contributed these super chats. That is so nice of you guys. What a beautiful thing to bless the channel with. Anyway, I'll be right back, and then we'll keep going. Good for her. See, that's good, right? Yeah, she needs it. Thank you. Okay. Hilda has moved spots. She's now passed out over there. By the way, we have a new puppy coming home on Sunday. I'm really excited. So I'll introduce you. Our daughters have decided to name him Thor. Thor and Hilda will be Minnesota Vikings. But he's a Cane Corso. He's gray. He's got a big star patch on his chest. He's coming home on Sunday, so we are super excited. I'm a Mastiff guy. I have always loved this breed. Hilda is a rescue. Her story was messed up, man, and she has been nothing but love coming into our house. It's like like mostly we've been rescue people who've adopted, but I've always really adored this breed. So we went to a breeder for this one. I'm sure we'll adopt again. But Cane Corsos, man, my next door neighbor when I was in graduate school had a Cane Corso, and I just fell in love. I was like, these dogs are so cool. I'm not sure what it is in me, if it's the Cancer. I just like that they're so sweet and they're like guardians at the same time. So maybe it's the Cancer in me that loves them so much. Yeah. So anyway, I have a special announcement for you guys, and then I'm going to open up for Q&A. So something that has been a part of Nightlight going back to the winter solstice has been meetups in Minneapolis. We have done meetups at a place called the Grapevine Collective in the Twin Cities, and we have gathered together for ritual silence and then some meditation on the meaning of the solstice, the equinox. We'll do it again for the summer solstice. And in those meetings, I have shared my own personal spiritual practice of sitting silently, sitting quietly, with no specific doctrine or dogma around the silence, other than it is sacred and beautiful to sit quietly. That's really it. That is my spiritual practice. I've had a lot of different spiritual practices: yoga, bhakti, Christianity, ayahuasca, so many different things. They've all been meaningful. Right now, my practice is sitting in quiet. And we have done that as a part of our rituals in these meetups. But for a while, I have been wanting to provide something that is free and open to anyone who is a subscriber of the channel or who appreciates the spiritual approach to the content that we take at Nightlight, that can just be a kind of a place to develop a spiritual practice if you don't have one, or a place to add something to your repertoire spiritually. I know that for a lot of people, this is a place where, the content is a part of your daily spiritual practice. That's what I hope it is. But I want something else. And I've felt this way for a while. And so what I'm going to start doing, I don't have a start date yet, so I'll be announcing it on the channel when I do. I'm going to start hosting a space, probably Sunday mornings, almost like a church service, not like an official church, but just a time to acknowledge the sacredness of that Sunday. And for many people who don't have a spiritual practice, this will be something that can be there for you. We'll meet up I think it's probably going to be through Zoom. I don't think I'll hold it through the channel, through the YouTube channel. And it will be an opportunity to come together and sit in silence. And then, as we have been doing in our meetups, after the silence is over, we'll open it up for people to share maybe some insights or reflections that came up for them during that time of meaningful silent sitting. Every week that we meet, I'll usually have a few little thoughts that I'll give about the value of sitting quietly to add into your own experience of its value for consideration. But it's not going to be a place really of doctrine or dogma outside of, hey, if you like to sit quietly, go internally with other souls, you believe there's value in that, and it can add to your spiritual life, then come join us. Come do it. So that's going to be starting, I believe, in June or July. It may take me a little bit to get everything set up in my schedule, but it'll be free, and it'll be a place you can come and just have a little bit of a spiritual practice. So, and then we can also, one of my favorite things about this ritual that we've been doing at the Grapevine Collective is, afterwards, in the practice of the Al-Anon 12-step program that my wife and I have attended, there's a time where people can share reflections without crosstalk, which means I don't say anything about your reflection. You don't say anything about mine. We just share what came up for us and what we learned or what insight. And I'm always amazed by how just listening to the insights of people who have just sat for 30 minutes in quiet will really hit me hard. It's like, in these circles, when 5 or 6 people say, here's what came up for me when I was sitting quietly, I'm like, I needed to hear that. I needed to hear what came up for you in your soul. It's a gift to me. Thank you. So that's something I'll be bringing in over the summer, and I'll give you all details for how you can sign up and join the weekly Zoom when we have this space set aside. And I hope that this will be a natural extension of the spiritual practice of astrology for people who see the channel as a part of that in their lives. So anyway, excited to share that with all of you. Now let's open for Q&A. If you have a question about anything astrological, we will, yeah, so the silence will probably be for half an hour, which I know for some people will be a push, but it's a good push. It's really beautiful to learn how to sit quietly for 30 minutes. So it'll probably be 30 minutes, but well, I'm going to think about it a little bit more. So anyhow, what questions do you have for me as a person, as an astrologer, about astrology? Don't ask questions specific about your chart, because unless I see your whole chart, it's really hard for me to answer. But maybe more general questions that you have, I'd be happy to take. Can you review the significance of Pluto going over the ascendant, descendant, midheaven, IC points? Yeah. So when Pluto's going over the ascendant, it really becomes about a moment of very substantive, very poignant personal transformation. I'm growing as a person. I'm changing as a person. Who I know myself to be is dying and being reborn. That is a very typical Pluto on the ascendant experience. It can be physical, psychological, energetic, but you will feel that force of personal transformation. It almost feels like it doesn't matter what's going on anywhere outside of just in me, in my psyche. It's like a crucible personally. When it's going across the descendant, you will often see critical transformations of the same kind happening in key relationships or in the interpersonal sphere of life. Relationships are dying and being reborn. People get married, people get divorced, people have babies, people move in together. Critical transformation in and through relationships, or maybe in the life of a spouse or partner as well. At the MC, it's typically very public. Pluto stationing within a couple degrees of my MC in Aquarius right now brought on this huge wave of like a couple videos that went viral. I was like, oh, there's Pluto at the midheaven, you know. And then at the IC, I mean, so public, professional transformation, death and rebirth around what you're doing or how you're doing it in the public eye. That's pretty common. At the IC, you're looking at foundations, inner life, private sphere, family, property, home, parents, ancestry as a point of Plutonian emphasis, which can mean you're looking at shadows, or there's processes of death and rebirth. A grandparent passes, sister has a baby, someone's getting married, you buy a new home, your childhood home is sold by your parents. All kinds of like the soil's being turned over at the roots. That's how I would briefly describe that. That's a good question. Okay, let's see. Julian says, in Quaker meetings, we do it for a whole hour. Very challenging indeed. But as a group, it is better because knowing that everyone else is going through the same thing and with their own thought self. Yeah. So Julian, in fact, my practice of sitting silently comes from attending Quaker meetings in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And although I can't always make the meetings, I see such value in sitting quietly that I've been inspired to bring it into these other spaces. So yeah, I mean, one of the things I love about the Quakers is that no one tells you what to believe or what to think. They just invite you to come in and sit quietly for an hour with community. And I have so loved that, that it's become a really sacred, very basic and easy practice for me. It's kind of fun when you just take the pressure off and you go, I don't have to meditate. I literally just have to sit here quietly. That's beautiful. Okay. What book can you recommend for the North and South nodes? I honestly don't recommend a book as much as I would recommend learning about them from the ancient Hellenistic and Vedic perspectives. There are a number of really in-depth videos on my channel that you can find where I go over those perspectives too, if you just search Nodes of the Moon on my channel. What can you say about Pluto square the chart ruler? Well, first of all, what I would urge you to consider is there isn't a chart ruler, right? So the modern idea that your ascendant ruler is your chart ruler is not really a traditional idea. There's something called the master of the nativity that involves like a complicated, some different complicated assessments or kind of calculations. I don't recommend any of them. I would honestly not recommend thinking of a planet as ruling your chart. I think it's problematic for a variety of reasons. But Pluto square your ascendant ruler, just thinking about it purely as the ascendant ruler, not as a chart ruler, usually will coincide with similar kinds of events to the Pluto ascendant transit I was just talking about. Pluto in the first house can make you very psychic or medium or spiritualist. I don't know. I don't know about that. I'm just kidding. Look, Pluto in the first house, just like Neptune in the first house or Uranus in the first house, could certainly be a part of how we recognize those skills or features of character in an individual. I'll say that. Does it make you psychic or medium or spiritualist? No, because it can, Pluto in the first house can mean a million different things. Like, for example, just to be, I'm certainly not saying this is true for everyone who has Pluto in the first house that has psychic or medium abilities or whatever. But Pluto in the first house is sometimes associated, for example, with the desire to be powerful. And that may be a shadow in the personality that Pluto in the first house natives have to face. Certainly not everyone. I'm not suggesting that. But in which case, someone with Pluto in the first house claiming to be a psychic or medium might just be someone who's, self-centered. Yeah, I don't know, right? But I'm making the point just to say, like, I'm just careful. Like, people who there's a lot of different things in a chart that may speak to someone who has some interesting ability or sixth sense or whatever. So I'm always just careful about treating anything like it's a rule that will repeat itself every single time. All right. How did you end up within the realm of Hellenistic astrology and whole sign houses? What appealed to you? Yeah. So the simple explanation is that I became completely immersed in the work of Geoffrey Cornelius. He is an astrologer who made a very strong case in a very famous book called The Moment of Astrology, Origins and Divination, that astrology is a form of divination. This doesn't mean that it doesn't have a very intelligent, like, logic and philosophical framework that's at work, that's very coherent and rational. But what it does mean is that this is why multiple house systems can work. Multiple zodiacs can work, the sidereal and the tropical. Just like different decks of tarot can work. Different art on the tarot can work, can invoke different things. That he really went to great lengths to explain how astrology on an epistemological level, which means how we know something is true or the means by which we come to truth philosophically, that astrology falls into the history of divinatory traditions on our planet, which are traditions that can speak truth in terms of how they describe things, or in terms of guidance or instruction they provide, or in terms of predictive abilities they have through a symbolic logic that's contained in the tortoise shell or the tarot cards or the I Ching or astrology or the tropical or sidereal zodiacs, etc. And that treating astrology as though it's an objective empirical science is misleading. It's not really what's going on. There's a different order of truth and reality that astrology is speaking to. So like, no one would say, for example, that art doesn't have its own truth-speaking capacity, that art can't be predictive, right? It's not to say that astrology is art, but it's more art-like than it is empirical. Anyhow, I became completely convinced of that view. It was like, oh, someone is speaking my language. This totally makes sense to me. This is now how I understand what astrology is. Concurrently, I was starting to study traditional forms of astrology because Geoffrey Cornelius was really a very good horary practitioner, and horary is a traditional form of astrology. Within the traditional world, I got exposed through Chris Brennan, Demetra George, and then Robert Schmidt, who turned out to live near me, to Hellenistic astrology. And what I found was that the logic and philosophy of whole signs, of the entire Hellenistic framework, philosophically, logically, and symbolically, was both more simple, more eloquent, deeper, and more consistent in its ability to describe and predict than the mishmash of modern concepts and ideas and practitioner specific idiosyncratic methods and so forth. I just was like, oh, this is really coherent. It's really eloquent. It's rooted in 2000 years of tradition. It makes sense. It can still be applied today with a lot of psychological sensibility and archetypal sensibility. So it just completely captured my imagination, and it gave me a framework that frankly is not only smarter and more coherent, but just simpler while lacking no depth or eloquence. It's like it's easier for people often to look at a circular tarot spread and to start making meaningful connections because of how coherent and organized it is. Whole sign houses is nothing more than the exact same idea, basically. It's like saying, look, here's just a more coherent, simple view of the chart with like signs and houses not being cut up all over the place. And because the ancient practice was very clearly a part of a divinatory way of looking at the world, the symbolic framework of ancient astrology is just a little simpler and more it's more organized. So I find that very useful as someone who is feeling very overwhelmed by the complicated nature of modern astrology and all these million different techniques. So for me, it was just that. But now it's like, my programs are a marriage of modern psychological, archetypal, and I think the best of Hellenistic astrology. Good question. And that's kind of how it happened for me. Question: why do you teach astrology opposed to being a practicing chart reader only? Well, I was both for a long time. It was only last year at this time that I cleared my books from client work. That was simply because of exhaustion, like, somewhere between 13 and 14,000 chart readings. And I was, 2-3 clients a day for 14 years. And so practicing for me was just reaching a place of burnout, considering the high volume of classes I was also teaching, content I was also producing, and then trying to be a dad, So it was like, yeah, I mean, not to I don't mean this to sound cocky, but I was like, I think I've earned a break. It's like I've done a lot of work with clients, but also it really came from, I was like, you know what? There are so many talented alumni and staff now in Nightlight who are teachers and practitioners. Let's use my platform and give them a turn. Let's build their careers. The same reason that I have Alex and Dana and Whitney and Alexandra. It's like I'm bringing people onto the platform to help other astrologers build and grow. When I'm at a place where I'm writing a book, I'm trying to take a little break from client work, which was, heavy after 14 years, and trying to give some room for this platform to support the growth of other astrologers. I think that's what good astrology schools, any kind of school, should do. It shouldn't just be about showcasing the lead teacher or practitioner. It should be like, how successful are the people coming out of your schools, your programs, So we've got a great staff of readers now taking the clients I would have taken. They're getting paid. They're growing their careers. Got more people on the channel helping, getting to build their work. And I have some help so I can do my best creative work and create some new things too, like the book I'm working on. But I do readings, like in my classrooms, you'll see that all of my curriculum involves live readings. So I'm still doing readings all the time. It's just they're in the classroom as opposed to having the private client practice. I don't honestly for me, it's hard to imagine teaching but not practicing. It's not hard for me to imagine practicing but not teaching. But I find it hard to understand how people can develop a healthy sense of authority teaching astrology unless it's been informed by some consistent level of client work. Maybe that's just me being inflexible and get off my lawn or something. I don't know. But anyway. This is a great question. Why do some people fit their archetypes so perfectly and others don't? I met a Scorpio sun, Cancer moon, Scorpio rising. He said he doesn't cry a lot. What? Yeah, well, so here's the thing is that people aren't archetypes. In fact, another thing that Liz Green said in her book that I just read was that one of the most common, um, like, most common ways that ancient astrologers and um, mystics, or even just mythologists, outlined the downfall of the soul. Like, when does the soul hit a really rough patch? By its own making, it's due to hubris, right? You've probably heard that word before from ancient Greek imagination. It's like the hubris is basically like pride comes before a fall. But the pride that Liz Green talked about that was specific to the ancient Greek tradition was the pride of trying to be a god, or which is to say that you try to be an archetype. This is a huge problem in modern psychological astrology. It's not that modern psychological astrology is bad or problematic at all. It's that when we start to think, I am an archetype, I am a Scorpio, I am my Mars in Leo, I am this, I am that. That is so alien to the actual tradition of astrology, right? The tradition of astrology says these are archetypal symbols that reflect something of the temporary expression of the soul, which itself is a mystery explored forever to a depth beyond report. It is not an archetype. Your soul is not an archetype, right? But your soul experiences itself through the mirror of archetypes in a body, in a life, in the material world. So you get to reflect upon your soul through archetypes. Conflation or identification with them is a kind of new age narcissism, just to put it like, I don't know, probably too casually to say it like that, right? But it's like new age self-centeredness to think I am my Mars in Scorpio, I am Cancer Sun, I am this and that. Talking about it like conventionally for fun, like I do it too. I'll say I'm a Cancer Sun, or so. I'm not like saying you can't use that language ever. It's just understanding what you actually mean by it. And a lot of people think, well, this person is supposed to act or behave this. Well, yeah, well, maybe their soul is relating to those archetypes in a way that's just different than what you've seen before, right? So stay curious, right? Don't let stereotypes inform your understanding of people or archetypes. Instead, get curious when you see someone who has various chart placements, and those chart placements are reflecting a soul that doesn't look or feel like other souls that have had similar chart placements. Get curious about it. Guess what? You'll find out something brand new about some of those archetypes, and something about the soul that's authentic and interesting. Archetypes are the means by which we get to know the soul, not who the soul is, right? It's like getting to know yourself by trying on different costumes. The costume isn't who you are, but it's a really fun way to explore who you are. That's what we're doing with a chart. You are not your chart, right? And anytime you start feeling that urge to get identified with your chart, with transits, with everything that's happening, and you get sucked in like that, pull yourself back, because that's not the spiritual practice of astrology speaking in your life. That's something else. And to me, that's what this whole channel sort of pushes back against by turning the jewel as we do all the time, Oh, this is fun. What does a work day look like? Review transits, record a YouTube video, lunch, astrology readings, admin. Good question. So it's changed over the years, like every year is a little different. But right now, it's get up in the morning. Like I'm like very Cap Moon in the 9th, Saturn in the 6th. Like I'm a creature of habit, Taurus rising, whatever. So I'm like, all right, I get up in the morning, make breakfast for the girls, help my wife get them out to school. She drives them to school. I get ready, go up to my office. I sit down, I research, plan, and then do my recording for the day. After that, then typically is when I'll have my sitting in silence, and then we'll do some emails, admin, maybe some horary readings that are in my inbox. And then I'll go to the gym. And I'm typically at the gym about 2.5 hours. So my workout's usually about an hour and a half, and then I'll hit about an hour of cardio after that. So like an hour and a half of weight resistance and an hour of cardio. And then I come home if there's any work I have to finish up. And then it's dinner and family time in the evening. And unless I'm teaching a webinar and then on the weekends, of course, I teach Friday afternoons, and then I teach Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings, all of the major classes. So Saturday after I'm done teaching, I go work out. Sunday's my day off from working out. And so, yeah, I'll work out Saturdays, come back, have the whole evening with the family Saturday. Sundays, I teach in the morning, and then I'm off for the rest of the day with the family. And that's pretty standard. Like that's like 365 for me because I've got to create content 5 days a week. So, yeah, it's pretty like, you can't, I don't think you can do what I do unless you're okay with routine and habits, which I'm pretty good with. So yeah, it's fun to share that because, I feel like, it's fun to give people a little glimpse into like what my day is like as a content creator. Hi, Adam. What are your thoughts on using whole sign versus Placidus? I think for myself, Placidus is very reflective of my core self, while whole sign seems to better reflect how I'm growing and changing. I don't think that there's an objective difference between the two. I think it's highly subjective. And yeah, so I don't disagree with that approach you're taking at all. Great. If it works for you, that's fun. I think that it's as subjective to me as different types of tarot spreads are: a past, present, future versus a Celtic cross. Which one's better? What is one doing versus another? Nobody knows. We don't know. Come on. but I think it's valuable to have different approaches and to play with different approaches. Like there's no fine or penalty for like having different symbolic lenses that we look at the chart through. How much do you believe in fate or free will? I'll answer a few more questions. We're going to turn to birth charts. Yeah. So I don't believe that fate and free will are like something you can believe in, right? They just exist. And the way I see it is the way that I was both taught by some of my teachers, experiences that I've had in, spiritual altered states, ayahuasca, as well as like the yogic tradition I've studied. So kind of a mishmash. Fate and free will are two aspects of the same thing. It's like a yin and yang type of situation. Like fate is one part of the circle, free will is the other part. There's little holes that wormhole into each other. There's in this world, like this is the best explanation I've ever heard philosophically. It came from a guru in India that I sat in on a talk with while I was there on pilgrimage back in, I want to say 2018. So he said, in this world, there's no unbound action, right? So as soon as you act, you say, oh, that was a free will choice. But as soon as you make a choice or take an action, that action is like a stick being dropped into a river, and the currents are going to carry it, right? And it has its own presence and it has its own contribution to the physics of what's happening, so to speak. But it's bound. As soon as the choice is made, it is put into a stream of concurrent forces that are regulated by like laws that are deeply mysterious, right? Maybe they're quantum mechanical or whatever the case might be, but there's no such thing as acting freely, because as soon as you act, the act is bound into a chain of actions and reactions and consequences. So the way that free will, what we're really talking about is like choice in a sense, and how free and open am I to choose something. That's really hard to quantify. First of all, this is why Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says that not even the wisest sages understand the workings of karma, and karma is action and reaction. So choice assumes a degree of openness. The soul itself, consciousness itself, being itself is in a sense that radical openness. But as soon as it acts in this impermanent realm of flux and karma, it is bound. And so in a sense, there is free will, but there's no such thing as free will once it's exercised. So which is why you'll find many mystical traditions focus on not acting and stepping away from action into the smallest amount of action possible, as in sitting in meditation all day, right? It's a path of inaction. And some traditions have believed that path of inaction is the road out of the realm of karma if you don't want to be here. I don't know, but it's above my pay grade. But the point is that action and choice, or freedom and action, are they're entailed in each other. You can't separate them. And ancient philosophers knew this very well. You see this implied in everything the Stoics wrote so enigmatically and beautifully. You see this in people like the work of Plotinus and Plato. I mean, it's ancient mystics were not as confounded by fate and free will as we are now. They saw them as interpenetrating parts of reality itself. So it's like, it's hard to say I believe in fate or free will because I don't see it like that. Okay. This is a good question. Amy says, can you speak to the difference between like a normal, healthy amount of struggle and fear as a catalyst to growth versus living in high alarm states with regularity and literally surviving day to day in fight or flight mode? Well, first of all, I think, as far as astrology goes, my best advice is to not tune into astrology that is constantly about epic gateways of transformation and crisis and spiritual heal. Like, take some of the drama out of your relation to astrology if that's a source of stress. I'm not going to say that my channel is without some potent transformational gateways being talked about, because it's part of life. But I try to cover transits in ways that are more about everyday life and everyday patterns that we may notice or themes that we may deal with, than constantly thinking of ourselves on some kind of evolutionary roller coaster ride. That might also just be my denial as a Taurus rising. I don't know. But I think, first of all, just be a good gatekeeper of your relationship with astrology. If the chart stresses you out, there is nothing that needs to be looked at in a chart. If there's anything that brings your alarm level up around evolution or spirituality, like, question, how valuable is this really? If astrology gives you a means by which to navigate and co-regulate your nervous system with the flow of the Tao, so to speak, then it's really working. Then that's what we want it to do. I don't know how people can do astrology and not have it feed into that anxiety state without accompanying practices. The most basic that I find to be the bedrock of my life are like relatively clean, healthy eating, like whole foods, clean foods, organic foods, lots of water, rest, physical exercise, and for me, quiet time, but it could be meditation time, altar time, maybe you paint, whatever it is. I think tending to your inner life, taking care of your body with clean, healthy food and water, and having some time for your, the inner creative spark. I think if you have those things going, you're also, if you have trauma, you're going to slowly start to heal it and you're going to learn practices of regulation, like regulating your nervous system. If there's a lot of trauma, it may take a long time and you may need more resources, like a therapist, some healing modalities, a little extra care and attention. And during that time, if astrology stresses you out, just don't use it. Get yourself right. Astrology is something that for a lot of people for many thousands of years has been a source of fear and anxiety. So we want to be on the right side of that. And if our predisposed trauma isn't helping us get there with astrology, then just take a break from it for a while, but then, hopefully you can come back to it and it'll be a helping thing. Those are the things that I know: grounding practices, learning how to regulate the nervous system, healing from trauma, and then being careful with what you take into your mind and your spirit. Good questions. One last question and then we'll be done. Can you give your opinion on how predictive versus prescriptive in the way you practice astrology, especially since you use horary? Well, here's my belief. My belief is that, there's a destiny path that is laid out in front of all of us. And I have no idea how much of that is, on the moving chessboard, like things can change, things can move. I believe there's a kind of flexibility to the way our destiny is playing out. And then I also believe that there are some things that are fixed. And the only reason I can say that is because I've had experiences that I can only describe in those terms. This couldn't have been any other way. I really feel that down to my bones. This was fated. This was destined. This was set out for me, by the gods, by my daimon, whatever. And then there's other times in life where I've really felt like, I think this would have gone a different way had I not done this. Or I think that this was a flexible shift on the chessboard of life. I have encountered clients over 14 years, 15 years that usually have the same experiences. Some things feel very fixed, some things feel very flexible, and you kind of know when you're dealing with one or the other. Sometimes it's a mystery, I guess. I believe astrology should have the capacity to be able to describe and predict both flexibly and specifically. Knowing how and when to apply both is the art of becoming a sensitive, careful, supportive astrologer. It takes time. It takes humility. It takes care of the soul sitting in front of us. We got to care about those things. But in certain contexts, predictive astrology is going to deeply help the soul and validate and support and affirm and encourage if it's done in the right way. Also, descriptive, flexible, open, archetypal prediction, where it's like these themes, this timeline, these topics being activated, but we'll see how, is also really important. Using astrology to describe things and give people different perspective on things they've experienced. There's no prediction involved in that. That's the kind of psychological, archetypal, descriptive dimension of astrology that's just like giving the soul a poetics by means of which to experience its own life. And what value can you place on that? That has nothing to do with prediction. All of these are tools we should have at our disposal that we should learn to use with care. And that's what all of my programs are designed to hopefully give people through a lot of modeling of live client work in classroom. So on that note, that makes a perfect segue into doing some live chart readings. I'm just going to do maybe 2 because it's already almost 12. We've been at this for like 2 hours. There are so many wonderful questions here. I wish that I could get to all of them. Oh, goodness. Yeah. Let's see. Well, I can just get to the bottom of the comments. Would be good. All right. So if you would like to join me in the studio and you're okay with being on camera, talking about your life, I'm going to ask some questions, stuff like that. Please put your time, date, and location of your birth into an email. And I want you to email it to this address. You're going to send it to grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. Please don't try to pay for a reading. I just do it randomly through the email. Email grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. Please put your name, date, time, location of birth into the email. Maybe tell me a topic if there is one that you'd like. I want to look at relationships, or I want to look at my career, or something like that. So I have a little sense. And send that to grabbed@nightlightastrology.com email address. And then I'm going to call some people. I'm going to send you a link. So stay by your email. If you email me, I'm going to send you a link to join me in the studio. I'm going to probably call 3 or 4 people in, just because sometimes people have connection issues. I'll probably only call on 2 of you. So don't be offended if you come into the studio, but I can't get to you. I always have to have a few extras in case a connection drops. So, but I'll try to get you next time if I don't get you today. And what I'm going to do is, waiting for the emails to come in right now. When you come on, what I'm going to do is do a little reading for you. It'll just be a little mini reading where we'll talk about what's happening, what your question might be. And I'm going to use it as an opportunity to talk a little bit about Hellenistic astrology, some of the techniques that we use, and do a little promo for my courses along the way. So let's get into it. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at my email now and see what's coming in. Yeah, okie dokie. So, oh gosh, there's already like 50. Jeez. All right, let's see here. These are just chosen at random, guys. So sometimes people get pissed off at me. All right, Luis, I sent you, Luis Lowe, I sent you a login. Kendall Barnett, I sent you a login. All right, Anna Wheeler, I have sent you a login. I'm going to send one more, and then I can probably only get to 2 of you, but we'll just see if everyone makes it into the studio okay. Remember, some of you sent me not all the information. You might have sent me your date and time, but not your city and state. I need all of it. And Catherine Rosenberger. Okay. I have some people now, so we'll see. While we're waiting for people to log in here, I'll answer a few more questions. Do you use alcohol? When I was in Vegas, I had a drink with dinner both of the 2 nights that I was there, and it was my first drink since last June. So I am a very seldomly will I have a drink. Sobriety has just been way too important for me. And you know, honestly, like my consciousness is just I don't feel very clear or as good or healthy if I drink more than a drink for sure. That's just me though. I have no judgments against people who drink. My wife has an easier time enjoying a beer if we're out someplace than I do, you know, like I don't know. It's just, you know, when you have a background, I didn't have an addiction to alcohol. I had an addiction to pain pills in my early 20s, opiates, but it kind of is there for anything. I have to be really careful about it, you know? So I don't really use it. Okie dokie. What was the best book you've read in the past year or two? Huh. The Way of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I think that's his name. It's like a fantasy book that I really enjoyed. There's another book I read called Moira, which is about the ancient Greek understanding of fate that was really good as well. Okay, we're going to get started here. So I'm going to call a few people in. Let's go to Catherine. Hey, Catherine, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hold on. Let me just turn. I've got the wrong speakers on. Let me get this fixed. Da, da, da. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can't believe it worked. I've been waiting to meet you for years. Hi.
Oh, perfect. Great. I'm glad you're here. Let me just, I want to make sure I've got your birth time correct first. So let me get this rolling here. I'm just going to use June 13th, 1991. Does that sound right?
Yes.
And sorry, let me get this set up here. 3:35 a.m. in DC.
Yes.
So I have you as a Taurus rising. Does that sound right to you?
Yep, you and I are in the same club.
Great. I love it. We take ridiculous joy at simple, stupid things, but that's okay.
I really resonated with what you were saying about routine earlier.
Right?
Yeah.
Every day I do the same thing when I wake up. It makes me feel so good.
Yep.
Okay, let me pull up your chart, Catherine. Oh, let's see here. Oh, shoot. Here we go. Nope. This is going to take me a second. Sorry. I have to put it over here. And Now I think it should work. Luis, I think I read your comment in MeWe this morning, and I was like, let's get Luis on here. That was such a sweet like end of the year comment you left in the year one group. So I'm going to get you on next. Okay, Catherine, can you see your chart on the screen?
Yeah, that looks like me.
Okay, amazing. So, what do we want to talk about? What's going on in your life right now? I like just like what's the state of the union in Catherine's world, and what could we focus on that would be really helpful for you right now?
Well, a lot of really good things are going on right now for me. I have a new relationship. I just got into a new relationship in the last 6 months or so, and it looks like I'm actually gonna be moving away from where I've been living for a while to go take the next step and be with him.
Great.
Um, and so I feel a lot of curiosity around that, around what's moving in the relational realms for me.
Perfect. Okay. So when did you get into the relationship? Tell me that.
October 26th of last year.
24.
26, well, yeah, 2024, but I think it was October 26th, maybe it was October 27th.
Either way, so late October,
Yes,
you know,
yes, late
somewhere in there.
October.
Yeah. Cool. Had you met before that, or was that your
Yes.
first? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we met on, like, right around Imbolc in 2024.
Okay. So the reason I ask is, one of the actually, let me pull up a transit by wheel really quick here. Um, so before I keep going though, tell me a little bit about like what kinds of questions do you have? Are you kind of like, is this it? Is this legit? Like what could we look at in relation to it? Because it's like I want to make sure that I don't just say like, yeah, look, there's a relationship.
Yeah, sure. I guess, yeah, to ask a more specific question, I feel mostly certain that it's right to move up there and take the next step with him, but I kinda I could use some clarity on that. Um, yeah.
On whether or not it looks like a good idea to take the next step.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to something like this, the context through which we read is so important. So if you're comfortable sharing this, are your reservations coming up because of things you've observed in the relationship or in him or in yourself? Or are they just irrational? Like, tell me a little bit more about where this is coming from. That'll help me.
Sure. I think everything I see in the relationship is a green light. Like, everything in the present is a green light, mostly.
Yeah.
It's stuff I think that I'm dealing with from the past.
Yeah.
Stuff that feels like it's mine more.
Mhm.
Um,
It's not like
stuff
he's giving you big red flags like, "Oh, watch out, he chews and eats paper," or,
No, no. I mean, nobody's perfect, but
Yeah.
I really feel like I've put the time in by now to know that, all the things about him that are a little quirky, I can probably handle them. They're fine.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So, now this may again, if anything is, like, uncomfortable to talk about given the setting, no big deal. When you say it's stuff from my past, are you talking about your upbringing or previous relationships or specific events or a pattern of some kind?
Yes.
Okay. Um, th fair enough. So does that one of the questions because I wanna locate that in the symbols, right?
Sure.
Is that would you say it's more about family and upbringing or more about specific previous relationships? One of the 2 more than the other?
Probably more about, specific previous failed romances and the
Okay.
tragedies around that.
Yeah. Yeah, fair, fair.
Yeah.
Um, so in those previous relationships, was the pattern could you describe it maybe generally without going into specifics if you don't feel comfortable? Like, for example, the rug was completely pulled out from beneath me. I was betrayed, or I sensed something wasn't right, but I didn't listen. And then I got in and I knew it wasn't right. Or, it's like, is there a specific pattern that you can outline?
Um, I would say both of those were there in different relationships in the past. I think that something that's kind of been pervasive is knowing that it was time to leave, but not doing it until a lot later.
Yeah. And have
But
you,
yeah, there. Oh, sorry?
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna go on to say there have been, a couple different kinds of betrayals. Um, Lovely stuff, really.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, have those just again, kind of just checking everything. Have those betrayals been on your side or the other person's side? Now, I have no judgments either way. I'm just
the
curious.
other person's side,
Yeah.
I'm pretty loyal.
Yeah. So right. So it's not like you've gotten in and then found that you can't really commit. It's been someone betraying your confidence, basically.
Yeah, yeah, and it hasn't just been, like, infidelities. It hasn't just been that, it's also been, betrayals of other kinds of trust,
Sure.
I've had lots of gnarly arguments come up and
Mhm.
yeah, that's I've been through it. I've
Yeah.
really been through it.
Yeah. You for sure. So what I would focus on, like if we had like a full hour, I would really want to dive into some of those patterns and events because the most, when I look at the chart and I'm trying to match, like this question coming up at this moment is coming up, as you're saying, not really because it's in this person or in this relationship, but because it's in your past. And in the past, which planet or symbol or set of symbols in the chart is mirroring the experience that you're describing to me? This is part of what we learn in my classes, is part of the process of astrological counseling. Pluto, for example, I think is a great candidate. Pluto in your seventh house, right?
Mm.
When Pluto's in the seventh house, among many other expressions that that archetype can, give us in the seventh house, Pluto in Scorpio can give experiences of intense kind of surges of unconscious destructive material. Often, Scorpio will involve trust and betrayal, uh, security and defensiveness, and things that threaten or make insecure or that destroy. The process that Pluto implies in the seventh house is one of evolving trust and depth and authenticity in relationships that probably will have to go through some death and rebirth experiences like the ones you've described, right? So when
Mm.
I'm like listening to, I'm going, yeah, that's Pluto, right? That really sounds like Pluto.
Huh.
Now, when I look at your chart right now, what I want to do is I want to figure out what's happening right now with this relationship and how is it interacting with that Pluto? Especially once I've gotten a pretty good feel for which planet is the culprit in the pattern that's being described that you're worried about, right? Like, well, I don't know. I've got, it's kind of like what you're saying is, I want to trust this relationship, but shit, I've got Pluto in the seventh,
You
That-
understand.
yeah, right. And so you're like, oh my God. Well, here's what I would say. Like, first of all, um, loyalty, Taurus rising, 3 planets, including Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, all in Leo. Such an important part of who you are. That sense of I give my heart to something fully, like good Taurus Leo combination. So I think that loyalty is very important. And one thing that I would advise, if anyone is my client, like if we had a full hour, I'd be like, look, if you get any hits on the radar that this is unstable, unsafe, unreliable, untrustworthy, listen to it. You're going to have such a keen radar for that stuff with Pluto in your seventh and with the solid, Venus Saturn opposition, for example, which, although it can be a painful opposition, is one that will also tune you into what is solid and committed and what isn't.
Mm.
So your ability to listen to yourself, trust your intuition, listen if something feels off, like, invest heavily in that part of yourself. And if that part of yourself isn't triggering anything right now, then, don't let the voices of trauma or suspicion or paranoia or worry because of old hurts, don't let it overwhelm. It's really that simple. But on the other hand, like, why would this be active right now? Well, right now, Pluto is starting to activate the Saturn Venus opposition. You see that right there?
Oh,
Right? I'm trying to point it out. There we go.
yeah,
So
okay.
Pluto is starting to activate your Saturn Venus opposition. The expectation of that opposition, along with something like Pluto in the seventh, might be, hey, look, during previous hard times in my life, Commitment was destroyed. The rug was pulled out from underneath me. I couldn't trust something. So if there was a secondary aspect in your chart, I'd put alongside of Pluto in Scorpio, it'd be the Venus-Saturn opposition. Right? Is this really stable? Can I really trust this? Not surprising, right? That over the next couple of years, Pluto's going to come right over that. Now, here's my optimistic prediction. If you stay true to your intuition, and your intuition has given you no hits, no red flags, this person loves you, and you're growing together, and you're happy. We're all going to hit our bumps in the road. We're all going to grow and evolve together in a relationship, but it's not like run,
No, it's really
right?
not.
Then my honest to God advice is live through this transit and see what it brings into the relationship. My guess is that it will bring healing and commitment and an opportunity to heal some old wounds through the deepening trust that has to come through a process of growing together with someone special. But it will bring those things up. And so knowing that it's going to, and that your best guide is to say, is this the same as those old situations? And if you're really feeling and sensing that it is, you'll have a clear, simple intuition. This is a test. Now you got to listen. Can't do it the same way as you did before. But my guess is it probably won't be. And what you'll be fighting will be the normal process of growing together with someone while overcoming old hurts. And that's like really common and standard for people going through a transit like this. So I would say, honestly, just trust the process. And the other thing is that, like, look, let's say there's something about this relationship that's not going to stand the test of time. Worst case scenario, our greatest fear when we're falling in love is that this won't last. If it doesn't, I can promise you that with Pluto hitting Saturn and Venus, this will not be the same as other relationships in how they ended. There's going to be a different capacity and maturity and depth and transformation that occurs because you're not the same person that you were during those experiences. And because Pluto is a life bringer. So if when I see relationships ending during Pluto transits, I'm usually like, okay, yeah, like breakups always suck, but you're going to find that the regenerative power is going to take you into a new phase of life where probably the next relationship would be totally different because of how powerful Pluto is. So if you're a worst case thinker, like I can sometimes be, all you have to think is like, well, look, if it doesn't last for whatever reason, this is going to be some ill-fated bad trip. I know that Pluto is going to give me something very deep and rich and fertile coming out of it. You can put money on that, So anyway, that would be like worst case scenario thinking. I don't think it's going to go that way. I really feel like Pluto hitting the Saturn-Venus dynamic for you, given the past, is going to be about maybe growing into marriage, maybe starting to think about a family, maybe getting a house together, maybe having to grow into trust that you never had to before. That it's going to require a lot from you, but you can do it.
So how long does this transit last?
Yeah, good question. We'll close with that, and then I'm going to move on to make sure I get through a few other people here. Let's go. So you look at Pluto coming over Saturn. Oops, I'm going to months. Let's go to years. So you'll see Pluto comes over Saturn by 2027. It's hanging out in opposition to Venus in 2028. It is going to be kind of fully pressing on by about 2029. So you're talking about the next 4 years. During that same timeline, there's a lot of other things happening in your chart as well. So I would encourage you not to get overwhelmed by the largeness of that timeline, because think about it. Like if I think about the first 4 years of moving in with my wife, those were the first 4 years that essentially brought us from dating to marriage and living together and, so many other things. So that long arc to me is very promising, given the strong, healthy start that you seem to be reflecting in this new relationship.
Awesome. Thank you. That's so reassuring.
You know what? If astrology isn't used to encourage, what the hell are we using it for,
Amen.
We can be real. We can outline, watch for this, keep your eye on that, but let's stay hopeful. And, if I don't have reason to be hopeful, if someone's like, yeah, I'm with this guy, but he smells awful and is mean to me, then I'm like, okay, well, let's go in a different direction with this reading. But, I just expect if people are honest with me, then we can do a really good job giving people encouragement or giving them advice or whatever.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, you bet. Thanks for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'm sure everyone appreciates you sharing because we all got to learn from it.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, bye. Okay, so Luis, you say it right? Is it Luis?
Yeah, hi.
Hello. Thank you. Luis is a year one student. She left a really nice, like our year one program is just about wrapping up. And you left a really beautiful note just expressing your appreciation for your process in the past year. I thought it was really nice. And I saw you pop into the inbox. I was like, let's get Luis on. That'll be fun.
I literally screamed. I was like, I can't believe it. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, hold on. Let me get your chart here. I'm going back in order where. Actually, you know what? No, I can't find it. So what I'm going to do is have you remind me. Let me just get this. What is your date of birth, Luis?
So it's the 21st of the 1st, 1990.
January 21st?
Yeah.
1990?
Yeah.
And what time?
7:37 a.m.
And the location?
Birmingham, UK.
How do you spell Birmingham?
It's BIRMINGHAM.
All right. So I have you, Luis, as a Capricorn rising. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
All right. Very good. So I'm going to put your chart on the screen. And let's all right, cool. What should we look at? What would be helpful for us to spend some time with?
So I used to be in the police, and I was there for 8 years, and then in 2022 October time I left, and the following September started a degree in law, and everything from then on was like it was just obstacle after obstacle. And even like in the beginning of starting to be in the process of leaving the police, it was the randomest events that unfolded, like you couldn't make it up. And I've wondered, is this like a signal that I shouldn't be doing this? Or when I go back to, so I had to take a year of interruption for uni because I got really ill, and which is one of the obstacles that I'm mentioning. And I keep thinking, like, is this going to work this time when I go back in September? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Like, are all these things that have happened like shaping that career in the future, or is it a sign that I should be doing something different? So I guess I'd just like to know if there was, because I know obviously Pluto is going in and out of Capricorn into Aquarius, and as you like see on my chart, there's probably some significant stuff, and I just really I wanted to know what it looked like to you from the chart.
Yeah, sure. So let me just make sure that I've understood. So I'm going to repeat back what I think I heard you say. So you worked in the police force, I guess that's what we would call it here. So you were like a police officer or whatever. You did that for how many years, by the way?
18 years. So 2017 to 2022.
Okay. And then you decided to step away from that. And as you did so, a lot of very synchronistic, sort of fated feeling events took place that made you feel like it was probably the right thing to step away. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, there were a few things that happened at the end of just before I left, that because I then ended up going into like an employment tribunal and things like that. So it was really it was a really traumatic time, and there were just so many things that just like would never happen normally. And then when I went to start doing my law degree, I got sick. Then there was issues at school with my children, and then it was just relationship issues. It was just one thing after the other, and it was almost just like I keep thinking, was it the universe being like, this isn't for you, or is it just that I needed to go on a bit of a detour first.
Right. Okay. A couple of ideas are coming to my mind with some things in your chart for sure. But let me ask just a few more questions. So it sounds like not only did you step away, but then going to school for law got detoured, relationship stuff started coming up, kids stuff started coming up. And since this initial detour from law enforcement took place, it's been one thing after another that sort of made you question if all of this is meant to be directing you to something completely different that you're not aware of. Is that?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I feel like it's either that, exactly what you said, or it's just that to become the lawyer I'm supposed to be in the future, these other things had to happen so that I had more understanding. And I'm just like in a constant, like, I just don't know. I've never felt that like this before. I've always been like, I know what I want to do and that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I did. Whereas this is quite like hard.
Well, I'm going to ask one more question, which is just a timing question. When did you initially leave law enforcement? Was it 2022?
Yeah, so it was around July that I left, but officially October.
Okay. Yeah. And then since then, it's been the one thing after another.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. So not surprisingly, the transit we're going to track, I'll tell you that first, then I'm going to go back to the natal chart for a second, is going to be Pluto, right? Not surprisingly that Pluto's implicated in a lot of charts, right? So it's such a handy tracking tool because of how much sort of evolutionary gravitas it brings to our lives. Venus was sitting over your 10th house ruler, Venus. Right, so that's your career house ruler. Venus in the first house brings up questions of artha and dharma, work in the world versus who I am essentially. That sounds like the conflict, right? Not surprisingly, we're going to see that the next thing that has happened very slowly over the past few years, after Pluto gets done on the ascendant or the 10th house ruler, Venus, also bringing up relationship stuff along the way. And Venus is also the ruler of your 5th house of children. So love, children, career, identity, right? All wrapped together with that Venus transit. But then Pluto enters Aquarius in April or whatever, March it was of 2023, and then starts going into a conjunction with your sun very closely. You've been in the midst of that since. So it's just like out of the frying pan into the fire, you know? A lot of change. Not surprising that we're talking about this as Pluto and Mars are dynamically interacting around your sun right now as well. So that's the transit. We'll come back and track that. But first, we need to give some natal context. So speaking now to everyone listening, and Louise is going to be familiar with this because she's been in the year 1 program. What we want to do when we're initially speaking with a client is to locate the reason for the reading in the chart, in the natal context, the natal promise. Then we can basically get into things at a deeper level. This is, by the way, most of the approach of astrology is therefore context-driven. You don't need to speak to the whole chart, nor do you need to synthesize everything in the chart. You need to be able to pull out of the chart what is being brought up at the moment, the divinatory moment of the reading itself. So for right now, the transit, I can see, Pluto's been moving over the 10th house ruler, the 5th house ruler, the natural ruler of love, and the sun, which is a natural symbol of life purpose. That's it. That's the transit activating this inner chart right now. So now I also have some symbols in the chart, the natal context, to work with Venus and the sun. So what kind of insight do Venus and the sun give us in this chart on an archetypal level? Well, this is a Venus retrograde. So you were born while Venus was retrograding in Capricorn. There was a recurrence of that during this period, by the way. But that Venus retrograde in Capricorn in the first house, in the most basic way, suggests that with respect to the intersection between Dharma, that means who I am, that makes me me. Without it, I am not me. The exploration of Dharma and its connection to your career house is going to be a big part of the life and will include probably one major period of revision between career and identity, right? So Venus in the first house retrograde ruling your 10th, my identity goes through a makeover in relation to my career. Not surprisingly, it happens at the intersection of things going on with my kids, fifth house ruler, and love, topical place for Venus, right? So the Venus retrograde it's perfect that Pluto is triggering that as all this happened. To me, this suggests that it's a different path. It can't be law enforcement exactly as you were doing it, or in the exact same role, or in the exact same way. Does that mean that you're an attorney instead? Maybe. Or does that mean it's something totally else? Something else? Maybe. I just know for sure with the Venus retrograde, when Pluto activated it and you left and all these things happened, it's probably not going to be the exact same thing it was before. That much I feel very confident in the most simple astrological terms. Here's the other thing I know about someone with a strong Capricorn stellium in the first house. I hear certain words, they pick up on my astrological radar, and I just know exactly what archetype is speaking. Several times, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with speaking this way, you said, what should I be doing? This is Capricorn rising speaking, right? Capricorn is an earthy archetype. Like one of the archetypes that Liz Green talks about with Capricorn is the earth father. So it's like feminine and earthy, but has a kind of a masculine or paternal quality to it. You can think about it that way. There's other ways of thinking about it too, but responsibility, duty, doing something that is noble because it is dutiful, because it requires hard work, effort, sacrifice, determination, serious, mature, adult qualities. That's going to be natural to your Dharma with all these planets in Capricorn, for sure. But you know what? Aquarius, your sun sign, which also has a lot to do with your life purpose. And then the second house will be related to skills you develop, the work you do in the world. It's an Arcta house. So it has to do with, how do you earn your living and things like that. Aquarius is ruled by a different kind of Saturnian archetype, a different version of Saturn. Aquarius says something like, what is the highest, most noble, authentic, beautiful ideal that I can fix my life to as a sense of intellectual, spiritual commitment? That Aquarius sun is asking that the dutifulness be connected to an idea that you decide is the most beautiful, is the most valuable. It's not just an ought or a should that is noble in the eyes of other people or society, even though there's a great amount of honor in doing those kinds of things. It's not just good because it ought to be good or it should be good. It's good from the Aquarius sun standpoint because it's like the star card in tarot. Something has got you twinkling in the eye. Something has you feeling like it lights you up inside. And you need to have this standard of conformity to that idea that takes the Capricorn dutifulness to a level of free-mindedness, right? It's like you're graduating into a different sphere of commitment than the Capricornian limit. Not that Capricorn is necessarily all about limits either, but the Venus retrograde ruling your career house in the house of Dharma says you got to recreate yourself. And how? According to ideas that shape your own professional path that really light you up inside. What is Pluto doing? Hovering right around your sun saying, if it doesn't really light you up inside, we're going to throw things in the way to try and really make you aware of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That is exactly, yeah, because while all of these things were going on and while sorry, my kids.
You're fine.
While I was interrupting my leave and like waiting to return, etc., that was when it was like, then I got sick and then nothing's working. So I started looking at herbs, and then that naturally led to astrology and like all of these things. And it was like a completely different world. And when it's interesting when you talk about like the ideal, the highest ideal, those thoughts have crossed my mind that actually natural law compared to man-made law, and what's, you know, just all of the like karma, and actually should I be even getting involved in somebody's karma if I'm working in law, because there's just so much more to it, and I don't want to make any wrong decisions. And is it more, I mean, the reason I went into law enforcement in the first place was because I had quite like a traumatic childhood, and so like, what can I do that's going to prevent that happening to other people going into law, because I understand those people. And then since the shifts happened, it's like, but there's this whole other world of law that I'm getting to know, and I feel like it's so much more valuable and important than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's really like, it's like a relief to hear.
Yeah,
because with all like the cat like stallion and everything, it's like, but you should be doing this. And yeah, I think like, I don't know, more seriously, and because in my like world, unfortunately, there isn't a lot of people who study astrology, and so it would be seen as me being like rebellious, which is hard.
For Capricorn rising especially, right? It's like, oh, I'm not a rebel. I'm a good girl. I do the right things. I'm, like Capricorn is very concerned with, respectability, maybe is the word.
Yeah, exactly that. Like that, it makes so much sense. So yeah, it's been a lot of like just confusion about what to do. And then I was like, but Libra is like judgment, and it's my 10th house, so a lot of thinking. Thank you so much.
Yeah, there is a law of the heart, and that law is not without its own like logos, its own intelligibility, its own respectability. And I guess I would say in sort of invest in the law of your heart, right? Where you can be the things you do, the things you build, the person you become, the path you follow can be both respectable, consequential. It can have a feeling of seriousness behind it, which is important for Saturn rising, important for Capricorn rising. But it can also be something that you've been guided to, that's in your heart, that doesn't feel like a total compromise, and that your heart is saying yes to. I think Pluto on the sun, one of the most powerful things it does is it says, look, this is the way of your heart, and you can't avoid it. You can't run from it. And when we are running from it, that's when it gets scary. We feel like something ominous is hunting us, but really it's our heart calling to us,
Yeah, it's so funny because like one of my first law classes when I went, before I quickly had to stop, was talking about what is the actual spirit of law. And then since then, finding it's just so, there's just so many like synchronicities and like hints almost. But yeah, it's, I guess I as a cat maybe need approval, but it's just sometimes it's just great to hear from someone else like it's okay.
Yeah, I think there's a thing that happens for Capricorns quite commonly, which is that there has to be failures, and that the failure of a path, or the failure of your own effort or your own ability, when it's accepted, when you just square up and say, okay, I failed. It's as though in Capricorn cosmic school, that is the seal of approval that you're ready for whatever it is that comes next. It's like just saying, well, that didn't work. I tried. It just didn't work. And, or like, I really want to do this thing, but I can't, and I accept that. There's a weird way in which the accepting of limitations and failure, it just brings the sun out in Capricorn. It really brings a lot more sunshine into the space when failure isn't seen as something impending that you have to avoid. Like getting it wrong. That's something you said, it's like, I don't want to get it wrong. Get it wrong. Get it really wrong, as long as your heart is glad,
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, I hope that this was, it was inspiring. the Pluto transit, you've got, I'd say another year to 2 of it really being on your sun in close proximity, but the next year for sure. The other thing that is really exciting for you is Uranus is going to trine your sun. So you're getting that over the summer, like late June, early July into August. Uranus trining your sun is going to be it's just going to be running that spirit of creative revolution through your sense of purpose, which, Pluto can be a little weighty. It's like, God, what am I supposed to do? I know I have to change, but I don't know what to do. And it just feels so, like heavy. It's like a bass drum. Uranus coming through is going to be much more crackly and sparky and exciting, and it'll give you some sense of what comes next, even if there's work required. That's like really thrilling. And I love Uranus Sun trines or conjunctions for that. Even the squares and oppositions are a little bit tougher, but a trine is really nice. So I think you'll enjoy that.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, Louise. And thanks again she left us just the year 1 class was blessed with a really nice note that she wrote about her appreciation for everyone. So I wanted to bring her on and say, we appreciate you too. I know everyone in class really appreciated your energy.
Thank you.
All right. Take it easy, Louise. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Anna and Kendall, thank you guys so much. I'm not going to be able to get to you today. Next time, just put a little note when we do a live, put a little note in saying I was there last time, and I'll make sure that I bring you guys on. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. There's Kendall. Hi, Kendall. Next time.
Thank you.
And Anna, who is waiting dutifully, thank you for being here. We'll get you next time. Okay. So, guys, thank you so much. I'm going to tell you for 2 quick seconds about the class that begins. So on June 22nd, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, the first year course that I teach will begin. It's a class that I teach, but I have a whole staff of people that you will get to know in the program. So if you go to the course page on nightlightastrology.com, you're going to see the first year course. You can scroll down to learn more about it. At the end of every daily piece of content, there's also an informational video you can watch during enrollment season that tells you all about the program. At the bottom, you will find the early bird payment options that are available until May 15th. Need-based tuition is there, as I've been saying throughout our live stream today. So if you need a little help to make the program happen, that allows you to pick within a sliding scale that can work with whatever your budget constraints might be. That's there to make sure that if there's no other way you can afford it, that you use that so that you can, get your goal of studying astrology accomplished. Now, the other thing that I will say about the program is that the general design of the program for the first year is about learning the underlying spiritual and philosophical rationale behind houses, signs, planets, aspects, dignities, which is so much more profound than, in my humble opinion, than just learning Capricorn means this, Mars means this, this aspect means that. We want to know why. Not just why, but why did astrologers ever come up with this in the first place? Or what is the spiritual understanding behind any particular facet of this language? Like, why is it considered to be a part of reality itself? When we have that kind of philosophical understanding, we have a skeleton key by means of which we can practice so much more intuitively and artfully. I teach a divinatory approach, which means everything is very context driven. You're not just learning rules. You're not just learning predictive techniques. We place a large emphasis in our programs through live client work, just like you saw here, but much more in depth on what is the context being brought to me right now, and how do I read for this context in front of me? Not how do I apply, vague methods that are repeated for every single person, but how do I address the situation and the soul in front of me using artful, intuitive approaches. And we give you the tools to develop that. You're going to find your own voice and style, of course. If you are someone, the 3 reasons I would say that astrology is worth studying with Nightlight. These are my 3 reasons. I'll leave you with this, and then we'll be done for the day. If you can't help but think, see, and perceive astrologically, then there's a good chance that this is a part of your spiritual path in this lifetime. And if that's you, I don't think there's anything more useful than becoming more of your own astrologer. This class is really meant to empower hobbyists and everyday spiritual people who love astrology to become more of their own expert, their own reader, their own guide. You'll always need readers. You'll always have astrologers that you look to, just like I still do. But empowering yourself to know more about astrology, if this is a lens you look at the world through every day, it's next level. It will take the effectiveness of astrology as a spiritual practice to a whole different level in your life as well. So that's one reason to join if you're thinking about it. Number two, you're looking for a guided, structured approach that takes the guesswork out of learning. I say this because not that my approach is the best approach or the only approach. It's one of many that I think are good out there. But I will say that when you're trying to navigate the world of astrology on your own, outside of a lineage that has a long history of a structured, focused, coherent, organized approach, it can be really overwhelming. So to have a lineage that you can entrain yourself to, learn through a curriculum process in community with myself and a staff of wonderful people, that to me is worth its weight in gold. Like if you're studying astrology and you get overwhelmed at times, this is a great path to take because it's going to give you not the answer, but it's going to give you a framework that you can use and build off from. And that's going to give you a lot of confidence. Number three, if you're looking for a lineage that you resonate with in a spiritual focus, if you're like, I want to study, but I want to find not just an astrologer, but really a community. Nightlight, we have a staff of tutors, course directors that lead you outside of the programs through tutoring sessions. And I teach all the main classes, but you're going to get to know a lot of people at Nightlight. Most of our students form groups outside of class to practice together. So if you're looking for a place to study where it's like, I resonate with this practitioner, there's a spiritual focus, I want a good community and a lineage that I can be a part of, I think that's one of Nightlight's best features. I'm a Cancer Sun, Cancer Mercury. I think of Nightlight as trying to embody a family-friendly, safe kind of space. So if any of those things are attracted to you, then consider signing up for the course. Thank you so much for letting me promote the course today. I know that your time is valuable, and it's been really fun to answer questions and do some horoscopes. Have a great day, everyone, and we will see you again next time.